talk to the legends of the creative and entertainment industries. We talk to those on the rise. Steen Anthony Nielsen asks about the highs, the lows, and everything in between. This is Outcast Creative, and this is Industry Interviews.
Hello, welcome to Industry Interview 150. Can you believe I've done 150 of these? We made it. Who knows? We might hit 200 before the end of 2026 if I can cram that many guests in. Now, tonight is someone I've wanted interviewed ever since I've started this podcast. I've wanted to get this guy on. Not only is he a visual effects supervisor at the absolute top of his game, and he's worked on some absolutely incredible television and film productions. But I have also met him several times in person. The first time I was introduced to Angus Bickerton was through my great late friend, Alan Marks, who was my visual effects supervisor, a man who gave me unlimited amounts of his time. I stayed at his house while I edited my first feature film, slept on his office floor for about 2 weeks. I returned the favour when he needed a place to stay in London, and he stayed with me, lived with me for about 6 months. And Alan Marks worked on Space Precinct, the Gerry Anderson science fiction show in the 90s, and I got to go down to Shepperton Film Studios and work, well, not work there, but look at the miniatures unit while Alan was working on it. And that's where I met Angus, and we all got plastered in the pub at Shepperton after that, on a glorious hot day, I recall. And then I came down to Shepperton a second time, where I got to have a peek at the Judge Dredd set, and Angus was also pottering around. So again, I think we went to the pub. Lots of memories of going to the pub with Angus, basically. Also working on Space Precinct, among other things, was my good friend and regular co-host on some of my shows, The Inside Man. Welcome back, sir.
Good evening. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Looking
no,
forward
not at all.
to,
I mean, I knew you'd want to listen in on this one, and I also thought you might have the nuggets. So great to have you as co-chair. Without any further ado, because I don't think we're going to have enough time to ask all the questions I want to get in, but we're gonna do as best we can. Let's get Angus on the Outcast Creative Industry Interview. Here we are. Welcome, Angus.
Evening to you both.
Thank you so much for giving up your spare time. I really appreciate it. Did you do the Spock thing? Did you do the Spock thing just then?
Yeah, that's my live long and prosper. That's my that's
great.
You know.
Favorite Star Trek film? This is a trick question, by the way.
That's got Wrath of Khan, obviously.
Yeah, okay, good. Yeah, all right. I would have had to have ended the podcast immediately if you'd given any other answer, but fantastic.
Can I cook or can't I? Yeah. Basically.
Well, thank you so much for giving up your free time. I really appreciate it, and it's also great
pleasure.
Great to talk to someone who knew.
Thank you for getting in contact.
Alan.
That's cool. Yeah, we were talking earlier about Alan, and I know he was a big influence on you, and he was a huge influence on me too. And he was a top man, basically.
We'll carve out some time to talk about him a little bit as we go. I don't know if his website is still up, actually, whether that's gone.
All right.
I don't think it is still up, sadly. I was just trying to find a picture of him, and fortunately he is on LinkedIn, so I'll pop him up in due course. But what we do with each of these interviews is we do a number of quick fire questions at the beginning. I say quick fire, but sometimes people do take about 10 minutes to get through one of them. So try and give a quick answer. There's no right or wrong answer to these. It's just to give me and the people watching a sense of the cultural stuff that impacted you as you were growing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what was the first movie you saw on the big screen at the cinema as a kid?
It was either, and I can't remember because they were both extremely formative, Chitty Chitty Bang Bang or Battle of Britain.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
Two great ones. We've done a special show about Battle of Britain, actually.
Yeah,
I covered that.
Still a favourite. And
yeah,
but like everybody, I was scared, frightened of the child catcher in Chitty Bang Bang, and I think I insisted on going back to see it again. Even though I'd been petrified, and so consequently, DVD Dick Van Dyke is a legend. Yes.
I mean, it was produced by Mr. Broccoli of the Eon Productions, James Bond.
Yeah, I know.
One of the few other films that they produced, and it's got quite a few Bond alumni in it because Goldfinger's in there.
Yeah,
there's a couple of other people in minor roles, maybe. Yeah. So
Cully was doing the matte paintings, I think. Yeah.
Right. What was the last film you saw on the big screen?
We took Hail Mary Project yesterday.
Yeah. Is it as good as they say? I haven't seen it yet.
I think it's good. I've kind of got that feeling of Spielberg in the 80s. I really enjoyed it. I think Lord and Miller have fashioned something that is, fun, light. I really enjoyed it. I thought they did a great job. Yeah, there are things I took issue with, but it was a great film.
Going to television since 1995, was there a TV show? And I'm talking about drama series, could be science fiction, but doesn't have to be. That you watched, that you saw the first episode and you were like, wow, this is so good. I've got to see all 6 seasons now.
That's a good question. I don't know. I can't immediately recall one other than Space Precinct, obviously, which I didn't religiously watch when it came out. I don't have. I mean, I watch a lot of television, but I just do not have that dedication to it like I do the cinema.
I mean, did you not get hooked on anything like Breaking Bad or The Shield or The Wire or any of those sort of groundbreaking? No. I know why, Angus, because you were too busy working, probably.
Hopefully, yes, I was. But no, I think my attention wanders at home. I like being trapped in the cinema. I like sitting in the dark. I like watching things on the big screen. I think it's the only way to watch things. I still believe very, very strongly that cinema is the only way to watch any film, even something that's just coming out for a week in order to promote the fact that it's going to be on Amazon or Netflix next week. Still the best way to go and see it. Definitely.
Agreed.
I know. Long may cinema live. Fingers crossed.
Because also, you remember when we went to the cinema? Well, I hope you don't mind me including you in this, but cinema sometimes the quality of the projection we saw was probably quite rubbish. We probably saw scratch prints. I remember going to see double bills of Bond movies. You'd see, Dr. No and From Russia with Love, Goldfinger and Thunderball. They'd be edited versions, so they were probably mishandled prints. They were scratchy, dirty. Who knows? In the legend has it that in the old days, cinemas ran their bulbs at half power in order to save them. So it wasn't the brightest image. It was shaky, and yet it captured our imaginations. And now cinema is pretty darn good. And this is one of the curious things I think throughout the history of cinema is we peak at the quality of things just as we are going into major change.
Yeah, that's interesting. Do you have a favourite cinema in London? A favourite screen?
Yes, absolutely.
What's yours?
It's the Olympic Cinema in Barnes.
Oh, I just had a screening of my short film there. What a great cinema that is! Yeah.
Well, no, it's a great cinema because it has the coolest ident sequence, because this is where the Rolling Stones, recorded. And there's a famous 1967 documentary about the Rolling Stones, and they filmed them as they were recording "Sympathy for the Devil."
Wow!
In the very cinema where your film was probably screened.
Right. Yeah.
Because they've converted the sound studios into cinemas, and
it's a beautiful screen. That
the coolest ident, and not only that, the screen's fantastic. The projection quality is immaculate. And you've got nice luxurious seats and places where you can put your glass of wine, basically.
The seats were extremely comfortable. My favourite's Empire Screen 1, but I particularly liked the old Empire Screen 1.
Well, that's the thing.
The laser show.
Yeah,
those are
exactly.
the days.
No, I would go with that, definitely. It's just, I've kind of just, for me, it's just ended up being more recent.
I understand. But that's, for most people that work in visual effects, they have this kind of zeitgeist moment where they go and see a film and it impacts them in such a way that I want to know how that was done. And that's often the segue of them going towards that career. And for our mutual late friend Alan Marks, I remember talking to him about this. That film for him was 2001 Space Odyssey.
Yeah.
And he was, saying he saw it on a massive screen. I think he saw it at the Odeon Marble Arch, which at the time was the biggest cinema in London. And sadly, no longer there. He said, the visuals and the lights, and he'd never seen anything like it. Of course, Star Wars had not been out at that time. Yeah. What was that moment for you?
Steve. I'm very good friends with Steve Begg. Steve Begg was very good friends with Alan Marks. We all used to meet up regularly. Maybe it's an age thing, but because for me, first of all, Thunderbirds was the format. That was the driving force for me. Yeah. That instilled a passion for visual effects. Then it really was UFO and Space 1999, and to be honest, I've got to be honest, I didn't see 2001 in the cinema until
I didn't either.
Until college days, basically. So prior to that, in my teens, the formative films were Star Wars and Close Encounters of the Third Kind, basically.
Right.
And I actually favored Close Encounters, and that's a real. But I don't know why. I loved the whole film of Close Encounters. I was into, I was kind of believing in UFOs at that time as well.
Yeah, same. Well, I believe in them even more now.
Yeah.
With all the new evidence that's been coming out.
Yeah.
So it's fair to say that a big influence on you was Gerry Anderson then, effectively.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so to actually end up, to work on a show of his, Space Precinct, not as I'm sure, with the greatest of respect to Alan, who was instrumental in making it work, and Steve, also the same. If not Gerry Anderson's finest.
No, it was.
But and apologies to yourself, Gary, because I think you may have worked on it as well. But,
yeah.
And I worked on it a lot as well. So I'm partially responsible. Well, here's the thing: I don't wish to speak ill of Gerry Anderson, but Steve Begg was very, very. I was doing motion control for the first sort of 8 or 9 episodes of Space Precinct.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We were based at M Stage at Shepperton. And Magic Camera Company had been contracted through Steve, so all through Steve's help. He'd got us the job of providing the motion control, which was kind of cutting edge. Remember, Babylon 5 was coming out at this time as well. And Lightwave and Amiga computers were just starting to break, and that's where Alan came in. And Steve and I had met Alan through a company called CFX, who were based in Darblay Street in Soho, and they were doing very early sort of
computer graphic imaging effects.
And so consequently, as we at the Magic Camera Company, who had been very analog up until that point, kind of recognized the need that we needed to move into the digital age. We naturally turned to Alan to sort of guide us through it, and he came in and helped us spend an awful lot of money on silicon graphics computers and early software, which cost a fortune and things like that. But Steve got us the Space Precinct job, and I was very, very keen and super happy to, just couldn't believe it, working on a Gerry Anderson show. He was on I stage with the model unit, as you remember. I was on M stage with the motion control camera, and we were doing the space stuff pretty much, really. But bizarrely, well, I say bizarrely, by about eight or nine episodes, I was kind of getting a little bit jaundiced and I wasn't doing a very good job, I don't think, for Steve in some respects. So Steve very kindly put me forward to be a sort of a coordinator, a visual effects coordinator over at Pinewood, because Pinewood was where they were shooting the live action. The miniatures unit was on I Stage at Shepperton, and the motion control unit was on M Stage. And then Magic Camera Company, through under the auspices of Alan, were doing the digital compositing in the early days. When I say in the early days, this was kind of new stuff. We were using Matador software to composite, and things like that, which is very crude early compositing software on Silicon Graphics machines, and rendering bits of 3D out of Amiga computers. So I got to work at Pinewood and got to meet Jerry Anderson. That was, I by this stage I've already met my absolute idol, which is Derek Meddings, but now I'm getting to work for Jerry Anderson. And
can I just stop you there so I don't forget? What was Derek Meddings like?
I cannot say, I mean, you've probably heard this many times, but I cannot say enough about Derek. I remember that, he said we set up the company at M Stage, and there were about 6 or 7 of us, ambitious young kids as part of the company. I was hired because I knew how to run a motion control rig. We had Anthony Hunt there, who was an optical printer operator, who's now running CineSight. We had Peter Chang was our kind of visual effects art director, who went on to set up Double Negative. We had Nigel Stone and Peter Talbot, who went on to become industry recognized VFX DOPs. We had Stefan Langer, who also became a kind of blue screen consultant. He was an optical cameraman. So we had all these people who would go on to be in the industry, but we were also very ambitious. We're so pleased to be working for Derek, but I remember, I can't say I have to put this correctly. I remember thinking, I love Derek so much, but I remember thinking he's so old-fashioned. He's not doing motion control like ILM, he's not doing, because the thing for Derek was, KISS, keep it simple, stupid. He just wanted to see it through the camera. He wanted to be able to judge it with his own eyes. So he preferred methodologies where he could see the final shot. He hated blue screen because he was handing those elements off to someone to optically composite somewhere else. So he just, the heyday and the great days of Derek, which are kind of the Roger Moore Bonds and the Superman films, he was doing
the model work on Spider.
he was
incredible stuff.
Big model work, but he was also doing composites. But he was doing those composites through combinations of projection, front projection, rear projection, so that he could control the composites, basically. And then he always felt slightly uncomfortable when we moved into that sort of motion control blue screen. I remember on Batman, it wasn't comfortable for him because he couldn't see the whole picture, which is what he'd always been used to. And that was his genius. And I remember thinking, he's a little bit old-fashioned, isn't he? He doesn't want to embrace motion control. But, I look back on it now and recognize his genius, really. That simplicity was his genius.
Basically, I mean, he really was a reflection of the real artistry of visual effects. A combination of every single element being in one frame. This is where, I mean, the only other person I think we can really compare him to, and I don't think it is overstretching it. I would say Ray Harryhausen.
I would agree. Harryhausen and Albert Whitlock.
Whitlock. Oh my goodness!
And you know what? They all knew each other as well. There was I think when we were doing Neverending Story 2, Albert Whitlock came over to supervise some plate shooting.
Oh my God!
Yeah, I got to actually. Yeah, I actually fulfilled a dream. I got to actually shoot a VistaVision plate for Albert Whitlock on Charlie Chaplin. I think.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. And
what was your starting point? Going back slightly, and we'll work our way back to Space Precinct. What was your starting point in the industry? Who gave you your first break? And tell us how that came about.
crudely put, I grew up in York. York is a beautiful city, but I couldn't be a pilot. So then I gravitated onto, you know, flying things in Thunderbirds, got fascinated by that, desperately wanted to get in the film industry, thought that I've got to go to London, went to college in London, just got to get close to the film industry, went to college, did college. And then at the end of college, I wrote, I can't claim loads, but 20 to 30 letters to every visual effects listing I could find in, I think back then it was, I can't remember, there was a book back then.
Probably Kelly's, was it?
It was kind of like Kelly's, yeah, you're right, yeah. And I just wrote to them all. And I got a lot of, obviously, thank you very much. You know, people used to do really nice letters back then.
Yes, they did.
They really nice projection letters.
Yeah, no, but they did.
They were
typed. Yeah. They either had.
Yeah. They actually took the time to write them as opposed to not writing at all.
Because I wrote to Derek when he was doing Spy Who Loved Me.
Right.
And I've got to dig it out actually, and I should put it on the Instagram page. I've got a signed picture from the 007 stage of the submarines in Spy Who Loved Me, signed by Derek Meddings. You know, saying,
my God. That's my favourite movie set of all time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I wrote to him then, and because he did that, you know, I went, oh, this is great. I'm talking to Derek Meddings. So I wrote to him again, and he answered again. Beautiful typewritten letters, letterheaded, you know, embossed letterhead, not the digital printing. And the same with oh, here's the thing. The other hero of mine was Les Bowie, who, of course, was the person who introduced Derek to the industry. And, of course, he's sort of synonymous with the Hammer films. And I wrote to him, and he was great, too. Lovely letter saying, thank you for your inquiry. You know, I haven't got any opportunities, all that sort of stuff. So I thought, this is great. I've got, you know, so I wrote to him again. And his wife wrote back and said, sadly, Les has just passed away. And that must have been when he was doing Dracula, the Frank Langella Dracula.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Because famously, the legend has it, he was using carbon tetrachloride to do the sort of mists inside Dracula's coffin. And that's a carcinogenic substance, obviously, which was used quite a lot as a sort of an effect. I'm not exactly sure the details, but of course he famously passed away just before he won the Superman Oscar.
Right. Because your first job was on Red Dwarf, wasn't it? Am I right?
Yeah. So to continue I basically, you know, went to college, wrote away, and I got a job in Soho because I did a little short film at college, which I did all on the animation camera. I was actually doing a photography course, but I figured I needed to make a film. So I made a film out of photographs, a bit like, I don't know if you know, there's a film called La Jetée by Chris Marker.
Yes.
Yeah. And so I thought, well, this is great. This is the perfect format. I can make a film out of stills. So I did a World War I drama, you know, made out of stills. And so I used that and I sent that away to animation and optical companies in Soho. And one company answered positively, and that was the Optical House.
Oh my goodness me, I worked for them.
Did you?
I used to do printing for them.
No way.
I used to do printing for the Optical House. We're going back to the early to mid 80s.
When Rod McKinley was there.
Yeah, and we did the Tetley Teabag commercials there.
Oh God!
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
yeah.
And the one thing I did, which was there, was I worked on the Aha video.
Fantastic.
Which one? Which Aha video?
Take on Me.
Take on Me.
Take on Me. Okay.
Because basically it was done through, I can't remember. Steve Barron was directing, who I later.
Yeah, Steve Barron. I've tried to get Steve Barron on here.
Steve Barron is also one of the absolute gents. I cannot tell you how he also is a major influence for me because I've never seen someone be so gentlemanly under pressure.
Right. I've written to him, but I've never got a reply, and I don't know if he's seen the message or not. So
I can only assume, because he's such a nice guy, I can only assume he's either busy, distracted, something, I don't know, whatever, but because he's, I can't say enough about Steve Farron. He's great.
Right.
And anyway, so yeah, he was doing that video for Aha, and we were projecting down the footage for this guy whose name I've sadly forgotten, from the National Film Board of Canada, who came in and would do the rotoscoping of all the frames for those, those drawings.
For the animation in the cafe, and the girl goes into the mirror and all that kind of thing.
So then, because I would sit there and watch him doing it, and then he went back to Canada, and they wanted some more drawings for the there's a sort of a sequence where you see a sort of them racing around on cafe racer bikes. So I did some of those. So I did about 3 or 4 frames in the Aha video. that's my greatest claim to fame.
That's great.
Yeah, but Rod McKinley
that got you your
I also
in the door.
Rod McKinley was great as well, I thought, because he took me on. Yeah. For my first job.
And how long did you work?
Mine as well.
How long did you work there?
Again, I was super ambitious. I was there for about 1.5 years. Back then, you had to join the ACTT, which and which I did. Julie did, and they would post job listings on their.
That's right. Yeah, in the notice board, you go indoors, upstairs, and was it Linda Lokes? I think was.
Yes.
Linda. Yeah.
So I saw this job for a trainee motion control camera operator. I thought, well, that's, this is Star Wars stuff. I've got to do this. I'm going from being a down shooter to a horizontal shooter. And I got a job with a company called Optical Film and Video Services in it's the street behind the Piccadilly Lights, Denman Street.
Right.
And I was trained up to use an Helicon motion control, which was an American motion control rig, and they brought over an American operator, and the idea was that he would teach me how to do it, it took me a long time to learn, but that became my, basically that company then went bust, and all the equipment was acquired by the Lee brothers to set up this visual effects facility at Shepperton. And so because I was the only person who knew how to operate the rig, woohoo, I got interviewed by Derek Meddings, and I got a job at Shepperton, and I was there at Shepperton for 8 or 9 years, and that was a fabulous training ground.
Because that Magic Camera Company were based there.
And we
they still are, I think.
because Jose is there. There's someone you should speak to as well. There's another great gent, Jose Grinnell.
I met Jose,
and
I think he, unless I'm getting him mixed up with someone, I think he went to Esher College.
Oh, did he?
In Surrey a few years before me.
Oh, right.
Because I remember when we met at Shepperton, that conversation happened with someone I got introduced to someone at Magic Camera, and that conversation happened. And I went to Esher because I was.
Well, did you meet Bill Pearson?
Can't remember,
because Bill Pearson went to Kingston College.
Right.
Yeah. Bill Pearson was another, he's a legendary model maker.
Absolutely fantastic.
I probably sold him a ticket at the cinema in Kingston where I worked for many years. So that's entirely possible. So how did the job on Red Dwarf come about?
Well, that was because I've just joined Magic Camera Company. I'm running the Helicon motion control rig, which is now we occupied M stage at Shepperton, and M stage is like not a big stage, 60 by 45, but we had our own blue screen, we had a front projection screen, we had 2 35mm, we had 2 Mitchell cameras that we could run high speed, we had smoke, we were allowed to do everything. That was what was great about it. We had our own set of lights, we would just be rigging up all our own lights, etc., all the time. On the side of M stage was a sort of a side building, and that's where I was based, with a smaller motion control rig, because we had a motion control rig from Santa Claus, built by Mark Roberts Motion Control, which ran down the middle of M stage. But I was running this Helicon rig in a smaller room, and that's where it was the mat room when Wally Vevers, I don't know if you ever heard of Wally Vevers, but Wally Vevers used to run the Shepperton effects department, and that's where all these.
I think I met him.
Did you really?
I think so.
Because he famously
really
passed away on the Keep in about 1983, something like that, I think. Another guy you should talk to as well, Stuart Galloway. He's currently working on film. Yeah. Great.
Yeah, these names all sound really familiar, but
Stuart did the Isle of Dogs, didn't he?
That's right. But Stuart's carved out a sort of
great guy.
Stuart's a polymath because basically he used to work. He worked for Wally Vevers as an optical cameraman. Then he moved on to Archidon, where he worked with Dennis Lowe.
Yeah,
and then he kind of got there's a nebulous period where I probably don't know what he did, but obviously he got involved with Captain Scarlet doing animation for the Jerry Anderson CG Captain Scarlet.
Yeah, Alan worked on the initial test pilot, didn't he? I remember that.
Yeah, and then but now Stuart's carved out a reputation for himself as a stop motion camera operator, running these custom rigs for stop motion films like Isle of Dogs. And now he's working on a film out in 3 Mills Studios, which I think I can tell you about, which is called Lincoln in the Bardo, which is a very, very cool film. And a year's worth of stop motion animation there.
He's very good, Stuart.
He's awesome.
And he's a smashing bloke.
He is. He's such a nice guy, and so sort of humble as well.
Yeah.
You know, he will not tell you. You have to give him a drink and squeeze the stories out of him, because otherwise he will not reveal all the amazing things he's done. Basically.
If you give Steve Begg a drink, you definitely get a lot of stories. That's, and he has promised to come on here, Steve.
Yeah, you should get Steve on board.
I've been pestering him for the last 2 years, and he says yes. He says yes, I'll come, and it'd be good to talk about Alan and blah blah. Yeah. And now I've got you on. I think the added pressure will be there. So Angus came on, and Angus said you would definitely come on. So
tell him that I said Steve,
prize him out at the pub.
The big wuss should come and do it.
So just take us to Red Dwarf quickly.
Oh yeah, so sorry, yeah. So then
topics to cover.
Then I haven't got
to Band of Brothers yet, and that's a big conversation.
So basically, we're a year into Medding's Magic Camera Company, and Derek basically went for a drink with Peter Ragg, who of course was doing second unit stuff on Thunderbirds, and was now firmly in with the Red Dwarf team, but through the BBC Visual Effects department. They'd done some motion control with Peerless and a guy called Peter Tyler, who's also a really talented guy, who did a lot of the classic Red Dwarf Moco shots that you see in the title sequences. Yeah. They were all done at Peerless. But I think, through that background, Derek basically won us Series 2 of Red Dwarf. So we did the motion control and some miniature landscapes for Series 2 of Red Dwarf, including there was this craft called the Blue Midget, which was meant to be the new sort of shuttlecraft, as it were. And Derek actually, he said, right, I'm going to do it all over again. He flew the Blue Midget on wires in a couple of shots for that series. Meanwhile, I was doing motion control with the Blue Midget and things like that. So that's how we got to work on it. And I got to work with Peter Ragg, who was also a gent, because Peter Ragg's the guy you always see in those old Thunderbirds photos. He's balancing on the end of a scaffold board, holding on to the Reds.
Yeah.
and swinging Thunderbird 2 around, basically.
Yeah, with a pole or something. I know exactly the pictures you mean.
Yeah, legend has it that Peter was a ballroom dancer. He liked ballroom dancing, and he had a great balance, and that's how he got the job of standing up there in the rigging, basically. Yeah.
I mean, you worked on it quite early on, but it's quite cool to be able to say that you worked on Red Dwarf, especially as it wasn't the season that no one likes to talk about. So,
to be honest, I think they've replaced most of the effects now from season 2 with digital equivalents. And
right.
I think so. honestly, these are formative and learning years for me. I don't know if I did I don't know if we did the greatest job, to be honest. Suffice to say, we didn't get season 3 of Red Dwarf.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But I really enjoyed it, because I always remember particularly. I don't know if you ever see those pictures from Blade Runner. We were trying to shoot blue screen, and we were having some problems with our main motion control rig, which was the Mark Roberts rig on our big stage. It wasn't repeating for some reason. This was always the thing. We do these tests. We'd shoot repeat tests to make sure, do double exposures to make sure the rig was absolutely repeating, and it wasn't. So this was a problem. So I got to do some more shots on my smaller rig in the side room, and the blue midget was, of course, blue, so you couldn't shoot it against blue screen. So I said, well, let's do it like Blade Runner. And that meant that you do a pass of the model against black, and then you'd do a separate pass, but instead of backlighting them, the other options were you could put a big white screen behind the model and get a silhouette. But the Blade Runner methodology was you covered the model in paper and white tape, and then you shot that onto high contrast film, and you got a positive black element silhouette of the craft. It would be slightly gnarly around the edges, but it didn't matter when it was going against a star field. You didn't kind of notice when the stars just sort of disappeared a fraction early. And I always remember I was doing one of those passes, and I was carefully putting white masking tape all over the model, and Derek came in and went, "What are you doing?"
Oh dear! Don't play with the boss's toys. I can imagine he would have been quite upset at that. I want to jump forward a little bit because we've got so much to cover. I wish I could go through your CV film by film, but we'd be doing an 8-hour stream if we did that. I'd like to jump forward, if I may, to I guess what would be a key moment for you in your career, because it seems to be the job where you kind of leveled up to visual effects supervisor, and that would be Crackerjack, aka Virtual Assassin, which might not be a film that many people have heard of, because it's a bit of a VHS release 90s B movie. But it did
straight to the 3 for $2.99 bin.
Indeed, but it did star one of the greatest character actors of all time, which is Brian James, who I've had actor Tim Thomerson on this channel.
Yeah, so that's Tim Thomerson. Sorry to correct you there, but Virtual Assassin is Cyberjack.
Well, it's Cyberjack, Cyberjack Virtual Assassin. It's been released under various different names to try and attempt to recuperate more money. Yeah,
before that, I did a film called Crackerjack.
This is it, isn't it?
No. So the Crackerjack was a kind of I did it in Vancouver. Oh, this is the thing. I basically convinced the bosses at Magic Camera. I said, "Can I take a holiday?" And I went to Vancouver and supervised this low-budget movie called Crackerjack in Vancouver.
But Virtual Assassin is Crackerjack. It's been retitled. It's the same. No,
Virtual Assassin is Cyberjack.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
that's something that IMDb's got wrong, because if you click onto the IMDb link for Crackerjack, it takes you to this movie, which is bizarre.
Oh, right. No, well, yeah. So basically, Crackerjack.
I might have done that wrong. Sorry. Carry on. Tell us about Cyberjack. That's the one with Christopher Plummer and Natasha Kinski. Is that the one?
That's Crackerjack. Yes, and that is kind of a low-budget Die Hard rip-off, basically.
Well, tell us about that. I haven't seen that.
Oh, wait. I should. And I got to have a good long chat with Christopher Plummer on set, of course, who's another, because going back to what we just talked about, he was in Battle of Britain in 1969.
Yeah, of course.
Thomas Ian Griffith was on the verge of supposedly a kind of that sort of B-movie action hero career.
Yeah.
And Natasha Kinski, well, she come out of things like Paris, Texas, and so it's got this sort of glossiness to it, but it's a pretty low budget movie. It was made by a company called North American Releasing in Vancouver, who would, back in those days, they would package up 3 films and go to the film markets with it. They'd do their high profile film, which was Crackerjack, which was a sort of a Die Hard ripoff, probably made for about 2 million Canadian dollars. And then they would go to Prague, and the producer there was called Lloyd Samandel, who was Czech, and they would make 2 women in prison movies for about $100,000 basically. And so they go to the film markets and they go,
Caged Heat and that kind of thing.
Exactly, it was Caged Heat. It was with Sylvester Stallone's former
Brigitte Nielsen.
Brigitte Nielsen, yeah. She'd usually be the prison governess or the prison guard. Yeah. So they'd go to the market with, we've got Cracker Jack, Die Hard ripoff, and 2 Caged Heat, Caged Heat 1, Caged Heat 2, something like that.
Right.
And that was the way they operated. They'd do 1 quality film and then 2 soft porn movies, basically.
Basically. Yeah.
So that doing Cracker Jack did then lead to me meeting a producer called John Curtis, who was a lovely gent, and then we got Cyberjack, and that Cyberjack was when Alan and I really first worked together, to be honest, because we were doing our very, very first digital effects.
Okay.
Using Lightwave and Amiga computers and Matador for compositing, basically. And so it's on you referred to my Instagram page. There's a couple of images there which were our very, very first fully digital renders. And
I'll have a look and see if I can find them.
We were we were learning, and I think if that's when you came to see us, because right at that time when we were shooting Cyberjack, they were shooting Judge Dredd on the backlot at Shepperton, so it must have been around about that time when you came to see us.
Yeah, probably was. That wasn't when he was doing Space Precinct, because I remember I came down to see him. I think I was shooting my first feature.
Oh, right.
And Alan helped out with a few things with that.
Yeah.
And I came down to see him after one of the shoots, and then we snuck onto the Judge Dredd set,
which was fantastic, wasn't it?
Yeah. And then I snuck onto it as an extra, but Alan doesn't know about that. I had a really long black coat that made me look like Harrison Ford in Blade Runner, and I had dyed long black hair. I had this really gothic look, and this woman. There was a signpost saying, Judge Dredd extras, Ray Knight extras this way, or something like that. And I was wandering about looking lost because I came staggering out the pub and I was a bit pissed. And it was a night shoot, of course. And this woman said, "You're looking for the Judge Dredd set. Are you one of the..." And I went, yes. They just directed me onto the set. It was quite boring, actually. I was standing around for ages, not doing anything. They did a few shots. I can't even remember if Sylvester Stallone was there, but a picture appeared in Total Film before the film came out, saying, now filming at Shepperton. And there's a picture of the set, and there's an illuminated sign, and it says sex food store, whatever that meant. And I'm standing right underneath that sign in my long coat.
Brilliant. I'll check that out. I might have that somewhere in the garage, yeah. But that's your Richard Stanley story, basically, isn't it? Do you know Richard Stanley? Yeah, who did Hardware.
Yeah.
And then he famously went off to do... he did
Dr. Moreau. Dr. Moreau.
I've met him as well.
Well, yeah, I met him recently because he did a really good film called Color Out of Space. I really enjoyed it.
Fantastic. Yeah, the Lovecraft thing, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's
superb.
Such a shame that he's been cancelled again. Because I really thought, can't go wrong, really. Richard Stanley plus Nicolas Cage plus H.P. Lovecraft. Yeah. And I just loved it. I thought it was a great, and I mean this with the greatest respect, it was a great B movie. Color Out of Space. It's really good. Yeah.
I don't think that's
a great B movie.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's B movies are now revered. So and I think you're right. I think it's a terrific film. Yeah. And I think you just mentioned Dust Devil as well, which I thought was excellent. Excellent.
Yeah, I think I think the version I saw was the heavily truncated, heavily edited version, and I still thought it was great.
But he's an interesting man, very, very interesting man, quirky, interesting, and highly original. I think
that's I got a script years ago, and he was going to direct, and I really wanted to do it because I thought he's could genuinely be one of the great British eccentric creative directors. Unfortunately, his career seems to have sort of gone off the rails slightly.
But he lives in a village in France now, doesn't he?
He does, But also,
he
on
used
top of
to
that,
have a flat by Tower Bridge. That's I actually got to go to his flat.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, and he was moaning. He said he bought it and it had a view of the river, and then they went and built a massive block of flats straight in front of it, blocked out his river view, which reduced the value of the property. He was very upset, and he'd just come off of the island of Dr. Moreau, and I can't remember how I met him. It was a friend of a friend. I think dated him once,
right?
And she was in London, and she said, "Would you want to go and meet Richard Stanley?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course. You know, let's go." And it was really nice, but you could tell it really affected him. And I said, "So, you've got to work with Val Kilmer. What was he like?" "He's a cunt." Really didn't pull any punches about that.
When you saw him, was he wearing the long leather coat and the big wide floppy hat?
He had the hat on. I can't remember. I don't remember. I don't think he would.
I.e., the same clothes you were wearing on the Judge Dredd backlot.
Yeah, that's his uniform, isn't it?
Yeah.
I've still got that coat somewhere. Believe it or not, because I've used it in a couple of plays. I think it might be hanging up over there. But yeah. Anyway, do carry on. Talk about what you did on Virtual Assassin. Did you get to meet any of the cast for this film, or was your unit self-contained?
Oh no, yeah, definitely. I was there for the shoot again, so I got to meet Breon James and
what was he like? Because Tim Thomason, who's been on my podcast, who did the Trancers films, he was best friends with him,
right? And
misses him dearly and spoke of him very fondly. I always thought he was a massively underrated actor. Really, I
think so too. Well, obviously, we didn't get onto it, but obviously, Blade Runner's right up there in my top 2 or 3 films. So yeah, Breon James is a big influence. Honest truth is, I felt he was quite reserved. So I can't say I got to know him very well. Possibly because he found himself working in a cheesy B movie in Vancouver. I don't know that, that was the interesting thing when you think about it. Christopher Plummer doing Crackerjack was, you could argue he was probably, it was like that was definitely a dip in his career, but yet he went on to do amazing things. And when I spoke to Christopher Plummer, and he did chat, and he never felt like, I've hit rock bottom. I'm in this, B movie, no, Z movie, V movie, a V movie in Vancouver. Whereas Breon James, I think I just got that impression, was like, yeah, what am I kind of doing here? A little bit, but that's me reading a lot into it. I can't really say too much beyond that.
Well, I heard he was a pretty dedicated actor and craft and all of that. Michael Dudikoff, what was he
Michael
like?
Dudikoff again, just showed up, did the job. Not really. Yeah, that was it. Really.
Yeah, I've written to him. I've tried to get him on as well, because I used to work for Canon. So
kind of a sort of a Harrison Ford's the same. Turns up on time, wants to do the day, wants to go home at 5 to 6.
Yeah,
and no later.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
like Sean Connery on First Night. If you've heard that story.
Well, also, I mean, and I think. Yeah, it's just I want to do my day. I want to go home. I don't want to do any more. That's it.
Yeah. So, was that your first sort of visual effects leading role kind of thing? You're a visual effects supervisor.
In theory, yes, that was it. And because of that, it was because of those 2 shows really that I think Roger Lofting and Anthony Hunt, who at Magic Camera Company, put my name forward to be a supervisor on Pinocchio, which was the sort of the jump from 3 for $2.99 films into in the bargain bin up to a film which I think was about 25 million at that time or something like that.
That was the Adventures of Pinocchio in 1996
with Steve Barron.
Yeah, Steve Barron directing it again. So that was the second time you'd worked for him after.
Yeah, I don't think I think because I was just a lowly, animation cameraman operator, assistant camera operator, back in the days of the Aha video. I don't think I met him then, to be honest. But what struck me about Steve Barron was, just very hugely creative. He deserved everything, all the success he had with those, films like the Mutant Ninja Turtles, and all the, the famous videos he did, obviously, as well, with Michael Jackson, and just such a really nice guy. And so one thing, what I learned from Steve Barron is about being honourable, and because it really struck me. I remember at the time, because our budget was sort of quite tight at the time, the producers were pushing us to do co-production deals and do the visual effects in different countries and so on. And this was in the early days of visual effects, and there was sort of a comfort factor in sticking with companies you knew, but they were saying, no, you've got to go and do some stuff in Germany, and so on. And I had a great experience working with them ultimately, but I was very loath to do so at the beginning, and I was trying to wriggle out of it. And I always remember that Steve just came up to me and said, look, I shook hands with the producers and said I'd do this, so we've got to do it. And I because it's within the power of directors to wriggle out of all sorts of things, to be honest, but he didn't. He stuck by his word, because he sometimes, as directors, you can say, look, I really feel creatively, I need to do this, I need to do that. It's better to do it here. It's better, and you can argue for getting things the way you want, but he never did that. And it always, I know it sounds kind of small, but it kind of really stuck with me, that, and I've always admired that, and I've kind of tried to, do the same thing. Not only that but on top of all that, is an incredibly nice guy and hugely creative as well. And I think because if you beyond that, he did Henson's Storyteller series, he did some Hallmark series that were really good as well. I mean, he did
I did that one as well, Henson's stories.
Yeah, you did, didn't you? I forgot about that. That's right.
Yeah.
Well, you'll know then, Gary. What it's like. Have you met him as well?
I have not, actually. I didn't meet him directly. No.
Right.
No.
But and he, so again, he totally trusted the Hensons because obviously he'd worked with them as well, and he appreciated. He appreciated artists. So when he saw an artist, he went, I don't know, I'm going to go with that person because I like what they do and I'm embracing what they do. That was the thing. Another thing I liked as well. It's a kind of because sometimes you have to put your faith in people. You can't, you don't always know, and you have to get a vibe sometimes, and you have to say, nope, this is it. I'm going to go with this person, and I'm going to stand by them. And he did.
You mentioned Space 1999 as influences when you were growing up. Of course, Martin Landau. I think he did the voice of Giuseppe in.
He played the character, yes. In Pinocchio. Yeah.
Did you get to meet him?
I did. I did, and I had a long conversation because we were all trapped. Not trapped. That's the wrong word. We had a fabulous time in Prague, which is where we shot the film in the Nazi-built Barrandov Studios. But there were fabulous, huge stages, and he was also. As a fan of Space 1999, I'd picked up some vibes that there had been issues during the series, the big stars, all that sort of stuff. He was, again, an absolute gent, happy to chat. He was lovely, really nice guy. The only time I had any grief with him was we came up with this idea because there were basically 6 puppeteers behind Pinocchio. I came up with this idea of dyeing all the blue screen material in UV dyes. and then wash, but they're not using anything UV based on their clothes. So the idea was that we could then shine UV light on, and the blue of all the rods and the puppeteers would glow and self-illuminate, and it would help us extract a map, because when you've got about 6 puppeteers crowded behind the puppet, it's very hard sometimes. The shadows and
sure.
It meant that we had to wash their clothes in some quite nasty materials, and that was the only time he complained, to be honest.
Right.
He said, what is this? And where, But
did he tell you any interesting Space 1999 stories?
No, I mean, again, the interesting thing is, because as a fan, I've read up about and I've seen things, but he was only positive about working on the series. He seemed to really enjoy it. He never said anything derogatory or negative about Jerry Anderson or anything like that. Because possibly we've heard stories that they just but I think series 2 things weren't.
Well, Fred Freiberger is the one who tends to get most.
Well, yeah, he gets it in the neck, doesn't he? But and we associate him with series 3 of Star Trek and series 2 of Space 1999.
Yeah.
But and again, it's bad. I don't wish to speak ill of him, but
no.
By all accounts, he did seem to wreck both series. So.
Yeah. Never mind.
Yes.
So that film I remember was quite a big movie when it came out. Pinocchio.
At the time, it was. I don't think it did very well.
No, I don't know why, because it was. I thought it was quite a good adaptation, and
there's
nothing wrong with it. It's sort of rated, it's got quite average ratings. And maybe it's just because there's been too many versions of Pinocchio and people didn't really want another one.
I find that one of the things that I think because visual effects are constantly evolving, they can date movies really, really quickly. So what was cutting edge, 2 years ago is now definitely blunt edge. And so that's why the films that survive really well are sometimes the lower tech movies. So for instance, for me, Aliens and Alien survive to this day. I could watch them without an issue at all, because actually it's in camera and it's low tech, and it ages much better than someone trying to be cutting edge and high tech, and that can suddenly, what's glorious one day can just look, old fashioned.
Yeah, I mean the Star Wars prequels, the effects in those that were
right. And if you look at Pinocchio, for instance, I would definitely say 2/3 of the visual effects are okay, and a third of just probably do not date very well at all. And that's the same, then on to the next film, which was Lost in Space, where I was incredibly ambitious and tried all sorts of things. And the things that have stood the test of time have been the simpler things. Our model unit, which Steve Begg ran.
Right.
Which Nigel Stone photographed, which Jose Grinnell built the miniatures for, that still holds up.
Because you were visual effects supervisor again on this film.
Yes. Yeah.
This was directed by the same guy that did Predator 2, if I remember rightly.
Stephen Hopkins. Also.
Stephen Hopkins.
Yes.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I remember when Alan told me he got this job, it was quite exciting because it was an iconic show back in the day. It was before my time, but I had heard of it, and we say Matt LeBlanc's in it and all this, and I went to see it at the cinema.
Yes,
and it had two really standout sequences. One was the battle at the beginning.
Yeah, the bubble fighter sequence, which Alan was very heavily involved in. Yeah,
he was. That's right. Yeah, and then the second sequence was the spider things.
Yes,
and that was incredible. That was quite a terrifying sequence. They're all coming down the corridor, and the kids operating the robot to try and destroy as many as they can. You had that whole convoluted time travel plot that sort of got a bit lost. Yeah, and the show got a bit, the film got a bit bogged down. Plus, you had to wait for William Hurt to do his very long acting takes and things.
Yes.
But But it's a film with a lot of good qualities, even if it doesn't maybe hang together.
Do you know what? I always thought Matt LeBlanc could have been a great action hero.
Yeah, he could. He was great in that.
Yeah, he could have been.
Him as an actor, actually. Yeah. He just keeps getting cast as variations of Joey. But
exactly. But yeah. I thought he could have become a new Die Hard type actor, basically.
Yeah,
and I thought it was great.
See that.
Yeah.
But was it? This was quite a big budget.
It was
movie.
Massive
it a fun experience.
It was a great experience. It was huge at the time. We had an unprecedented 765 visual effects shots, which nowadays is just a puny count. That Hail Mary project. An average feature film, 2-hour film, probably has about 2,000 cuts in it.
Yeah.
If it's an action movie, maybe 2,300 for quite lots of quicker cuts. And Hail Mary was 2.5 hours. I can guarantee you that every shot in that movie was a visual effects shot. Sometimes obviously that might have been painting something out, painting a rig out, restoring a set. But yeah, every shot. So you're talking 2,300 visual effects shots plus, because I know Barry Hemsley, the producer, very well, visual effects producer, very well. There were probably about 800 shots that never made it into the movie that they worked on. So that's the order of the day these days, just about on a big film like that. So by comparison, 762 shots on Lost in Space, is not very many, but it was unprecedented at the time.
That's a huge miniature that's on display now. This is Jupiter 1.
Yeah,
on the back
courtesy of Jose Grinnell and his awesome model unit. Yeah, model team.
How wide was that model in actual size?
I think it was just over 6 foot in diameter.
Right.
So that's the Jupiter 1 in theory. That was our notion, was that that was the launch vehicle out of which came the Jupiter 2. Here, this thing here.
Right. Inside Man, that's not one of the things you nicked that you've got in your garden, is it?
No, it's not. No.
You'd be surprised how many things this man has acquired. Yeah.
Purloined, liberated, gifted. I've got a few. I'll tell you after.
a few items. Well, let's move on to something else that you're both very familiar with, because you both worked on it. Inside Man and I, we did. I think it was a 6-part
11.
stream. We did
11.
2 episodes per show, right?
No, we didn't. We did 1 episode per show, and we also did the missing episode as well.
Oh, that's right. So
the unproduced episode.
Yeah, because we had a huge amount of inside knowledge from Band of Brothers. One of the actors actually stayed at my house when he filmed it.
Oh,
There was a guy called Stephen Walters, who was the guy with the bazooka. He's too close. He's too close. When the tank's coming over the hill in episode 3, Quarantine, he came running in to the house from his car and was like, "I've got to blow up a tank today." You would have loved it, Lance, looking at my shelf of German tanks that I had up in my room at the time, and I was quite jealous. I was thinking, I wish I could have blagged my way into that set. I don't think a long black trench coat would have worked. But this is to have your name in any way associated with this show, it's like saying, in my opinion, it's the same as saying I worked on Star Wars, or I worked on Lord of the Rings, I worked on Band of Brothers. In one way that those shows don't have. It's a slightly higher accolade of badge of honor, because you were involved in a show that really meant something to people. The kids of these men who, at an extremely young age, undertook these incredible risks on our behalf to free Europe from tyranny.
Yeah.
And my father was a runner in the Danish resistance, and he had all sorts of stories about the Nazis and smuggling by them and over to Sweden and things like this. But what an incredible show to be visual effects supervisor on. So I've got loads of questions about this, but let's try and get through it as quick as we can. How many visual shots were there? Because Alan, who was the art director, was also a good friend of mine. In fact,
that was another lovely guy. Wow, what a lovely guy! And
what
he
a guy!
Stuff as well. Yeah,
I did the main speech at his remembrance service.
Oh wow!
I got there, and his wife had asked me if I'd say a few words over the phone, and I was like, "Of course, yeah, absolutely." And I got there, and some guy came up to me. "Are you Lance?" He said, "Yeah." "You're doing the main speach, right?" "Yeah, sure." And I hadn't even written anything, so I had to go talk, rush to the bar and down a whiskey and write this big speech out. But I interviewed him. The podcast is also on. It was the last interview he ever gave.
Oh, wow.
But so he worked on this
with you. When was that? When was the last? When was that?
We did the interview at Pinewood, and it was, I want to say 2017. Might have been a year later.
Right.
I think it was, but it's filmed outside at Pinewood, and it's on the channel in 2 parts, and we talked about him.
I'll check that out, because he was just such a nice guy. Yeah.
Oh, big conversations about Bridge Too Far and all of those kinds of things. And Peter McDonald's been on the channel as well. So
yeah, I've seen Peter. I know Peter McDonald very well. And,
lovely man. Yeah. Lovely man. How many visual effects shots were on Band of Brothers in total? What was the list like?
Do you know? I don't think it was that high. I think we're probably talking 800 or 900 across of 10 episodes. So it's interesting. You said 11. I only know 10 episodes.
Yeah.
Sorry, Inside Man. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was going to say. Yeah. So the amount of visual effects shots on. Funny enough, I actually have a lot of your visual effects documentation here. I've got folders and folders of all of your VFX call sheets.
So if it went missing, you know where it is now. Just
yeah.
I've actually got a folder in front of me, and I've got quite a few of the VFX storyboards as well. So have all the VFX storyboards from Ep 1 to I think Ep 3. Some from 5, 10 as well, which was the Eagle's Nest VFX stuff. But yeah, so in terms of the schedule, right? I mean, I personally do know the schedule, but just for the benefit of the audience, the schedule for each episode, what was that was allocated to you for those?
Well, that was
shots?
So yes, it was a very generous schedule. In that, I think my memory is we shot for nearly 36 weeks, so that works out at around about 3.5 weeks per episode. And in theory, we had 2 teams. We had a red and a blue team doing alternative.
Oh yeah, like that's the same as Inside Man with the. Yeah, units you were on, wasn't it? Red and blue team.
Yeah. So so we had alternating episodes, but nonetheless, we still seem to work out around about that amount of time, I think. So, and then I think we still had a good. My memory is that we had probably 6 months of post production. I think after that. But we were editing as we were going along, though the episodes were pretty much edited by the time we'd finished shooting, to be honest. But yeah, and it was a very I wouldn't say comfortable schedule, because but they'll be very rare to have that kind of amount of time these days, I think, to be honest. Yeah.
So in terms of, because I remember the first episode, the Curry episode, and the fact that it went back to HBO, and the notes came back to say, some things just aren't working, and that we had the massive reshoots, if you remember. So we pretty much did episode 1 pretty much all over again. So what was it like for the VFX department? What additional footage did you have to come up with?
To be honest, we didn't feel that too badly. Our big emphasis was on the parachute drop in
Normandy. The night one.
Yeah, so which was Richard Longcrane directing, who he's another. Richard Longcrane's one of the great director gentlemen as well, who I also.
I'd love to get him on if you could pass that message on.
Yeah,
love to get him on.
That man has done. I mean, he's starred in films. He's directed Tomorrow's World.
Yeah, he's got an amazing history.
He's fantastic. He's an awesome gentleman who I also owe a lot to. got to know him through Band of Brothers. He did. Do you know what? I'm trying to remember. Is it 2 or 3 when they do the parachute? I think it's 3 when they do the parachute. No, it's 2. They take off at the end of episode 1.
Yeah, the end of episode 1, they're going over, and it's the beginning of episode 2, and then you've got the daylight drop in the Holland episode as well, of course.
Yes, which was different directors. Yeah. I really enjoyed. I didn't feel the problems, because the idea what happened was, obviously it was executive produced by the likes of Steven Spielberg and Tom Hanks. Tom Hanks was there. He was, at the time when we first saw him, he still had a long beard and he was really gaunt because he was taking 3 months off on Castaway to lose weight, basically, and grow his hair out. But the overriding man in charge was a gentleman called Tony Toe.
Yeah.
Who was pretty much the Napoleon of the series, to be honest.
Yeah.
And
there's another one I've written to back in the day.
I have to be honest, I didn't get on with Tony Toe at all. We just never clicked. But I credit him with basically constantly, he really focused the series. He shuttled between Steven Spielberg and Tom Hanks and HBO, making sure every party was happy. So there was scope in the schedule for those reshoots, and it felt, I always felt quite natural to me. We know the fact that we've got, because Richard Loncring went back, I remember, to reshoot quite a few of his trench scenes. But we just took it as part of the process, so it didn't feel terrible.
I mean, it's always good to have somebody like Tony Toe. I mean, that he is definitely on your side, and everybody's trying to get everybody to pull in the right direction. But I think without the formidable might of Mary Richards, the production manager as well, I think he was just superb.
Yes,
she was great to have everything trickle down from Tony Toe to production.
I'd say Tony Toe is probably, the Napoleon, but Mary is sort of the heart of it. Really.
Yeah. Oh my God.
She's so nice, such a lovely person.
Yeah.
Strong, like a kind of a school teachery strong, but she's such a nice person.
Lovely.
And she really held it together. And Bernie Bellew as well. With her,
Bernie Bellew, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
What was the most challenging shot that you had to do on the show?
Well, it was episode 2, the parachute. That kind of became sort of, for a while, all encompassing. We wanted it to be this great sequence. So we did a lot of miniature motion control of the Dakotas for that. And it was it's interesting because we did quite a lot of previs for that, again with some great we had an in-house team doing previs for that. We had a great time.
We had some amazing stills of the unit when Inside Man and I did the whole breakdown of the series. You should watch it. It's really detailed.
Yeah, I loved it.
And it was really emotional for us doing that. I think we interviewed Dale Dye about halfway through as well. Inside Man got to tell Dale personally how much the show meant to him, which was a really emotional moment. I was so glad that you said that, mate.
Also a great guy, and I think obviously he ran the boot camp, and I think all the actors speak so highly of him, don't they? From such a form. I mean, how many great actors today came out of Band of Brothers?
Out of that show. I know. So many. So we had quite a few pictures of Dakotas on sticks and things that we showed. Are any of them still around?
Because we built some pretty darn big models. First of all, the special effects team did a huge fuselage on a motion base, and then we had similar sort of rig for our. I'm trying to remember. I think we were 5th scale Dakota. It was pretty darn big, and we shot extensively for quite a few weeks in the old hangar stage at Hatfield. I remember actually, because I think a lot about that series was that we were given, right at the beginning of the series, we were given these huge folders which were reproductions of Richard Winter's notes that formed the book, basically. So all he'd written down after the war, everything he could, and that's what went into Ambrose's book, really, which is why he is the center of the series. And so we got to read all this personal testimony, and I always think that what's interesting about that is that the writers, the brief was, we have to honor these stories as closely as possible.
Yeah.
We have to, but you also have to make a dramatic story arc over 10 episodes, the story of Easy Company over 10 episodes.
Yeah.
So slowly what happened, we started out with these scripts, and then what happened is that stories had to be merged.
Yeah.
For dramatic reasons.
Yeah, some characters got cut out, didn't they?
Yeah. And yet then, this is the most amazing, we had the premiere of the first 2 episodes on Normandy Beach,
yeah, I remember.
Omar, and they built a tent and they showed it in there, and they brought all those veterans that you see at the beginning and end of each episode.
Yeah.
And their families. And I got to talk to some of them, and of course they said things. They said things like, our granddad has never spoken about this before.
Yeah, you hear that a lot. You hear that a lot.
When the episodes ran, there were some in wheelchairs at the beginning, and they kept leaving and coming back in again, and it was because they couldn't. It was too emotional for them to watch, and they had to leave.
Wow!
But then they had to come back again, and I was sitting next to a huge American guy, and he was in tears because his dad was one of the characters. I can't remember.
Wow.
So it was an incredibly emotive experience. But what I talk about, and I mean this with no disrespect, is that they all said that's exactly how it was. And of course, we did strive to honor them and do it as truthfully as possible. But you have to, when you're doing drama, you have to reshape certain things. And yet they said, but that's exactly how it was. So I'm always fascinated by memory. And, because obviously these guys went through these incredible experiences. And it evoked the feeling, the memories for them.
I think do you think that that's the difference between realism, something realistic, and something that is truthful?
Yeah.
I think it's the importance of being truthful is incalculable in comparison to something being what's considered to be realistic.
Yes, I agree. And for me, it was the interviews that couched the episodes that make the series. To be honest, because again, crudely put, sometimes we were mimicking Saving Private Ryan. To be honest, we were using all the shooting tropes. We were shooting with 45-degree shutters, shaky cameras, all that sort of stuff, and mimicking what what really Spielberg had done for the first time in an incredible way in Saving Private Ryan. But the thing that made the series work more than effects or anything, the way we shot it, was the real veterans that gave it that truthfulness. Really, I think.
Yeah, totally agree.
I mean, that must have been certainly one of the, just because of that real emotion that was attached to that project. That must have been one of the highlights of your career, surely.
It was. It's one of those things where, yes, more than anything else, apart from maybe Ella Enchanted, that's the thing that I've worked on that people talk about the most. Yeah, and it's really interesting. It's a sort of younger people I've worked with saw it with their dads.
Yeah,
and their dads loved it. So it's kind of like, when we were younger, maybe we watched James Bond movies with our dads, and they were formative. Band of Brothers is one of those cross-generational formative experiences where they watched it with their parents, and it means a lot to the kids, to their children, basically. So I am very, I was just incredibly fortunate to work on something like that, to be honest.
Yeah, Well, let's move on. Now, are you okay for time, Angus? I just want to check because we've gone over slightly.
Yeah, other than that, I don't want to be boring you to death.
No. You're not boring us at all.
No chance of that.
I want to know whether I need to jump straight to House of Dragon or whether we can talk about a couple of other things first.
What, like Ella Enchanted?
Well, let's talk about Ella Enchanted before we. Yeah, because I can tell that you're keen.
It's not. No, it's just interesting because you know, I remember at the time, I'm going to be absolutely honest, I thought, oh well, God, it's like a teen, Cinderella movie, but of course we had an amazing young actress in it, and it's a cheesy movie, but I now know, people who it was a formative experience for them when they were teenagers, when they were sort of between 10 and 14 or something like that. So I joke about it, but genuinely, I love doing it. But it's one of those films that actually people talk to me more about than others.
Yeah, because this was a young Anne Hathaway.
Yeah, who you could tell was an immediate star. Yeah,
Hugh Dancy was in it as well. Who I'm told is a really lovely guy.
Yeah, and because bear in mind, I've just come off Band of Brothers, and I'm doing, I've done a serious World War II series,
tanks, and all of that.
Yeah, and I'm working on Ella Enchanted, and I'm thinking, what is this cheesy, lightweight teen movie? Really enjoyed it. Had a great time in Ireland, in Dublin, and bizarrely, it's one of those films that I get asked about more.
Yeah. I guess it's also one you could show to your kids, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's pretty mild.
Yeah. Was there? I mean, were you doing sort of miniature castles and that? Because I haven't seen the film. I'll be honest.
Yeah, we did.
I was probably not the target audience. Were you doing miniature castles and that kind of thing?
We did. Yeah, we did a lot of miniatures. We had a model workshop run by Robbie Scott. He'd just come. I think he'd just finished doing Batman. You see, yeah, that's the other thing. Batman Begins is being made. My wife was working on Batman Begins. I'm working on Ella Enchanted. So so we did build some big castle pieces. We did. I don't think you see it these days when you see the film. You know how people like to do riff on the company logo. Well, of course. This was a Miramax film. So the idea back in the day, the Miramax logo was you would fly over the water and tilt up to the Manhattan skyline. Well, the gag for us was that Manhattan skyline would become the city of Frel, which was Ella's city, and it was like a castle but in Manhattan form. So we transitioned to this sort of medieval Manhattan, which we've built some huge miniatures to do that. And I think these days, if you watch the film, they've cut that out because no one wants Miramax on the film. Basically.
No, they don't, do they?
No.
Yeah. Well, can't really blame them.
No.
I think there's a shot. I mean, it's a small photograph, but there's a shot here of one of the miniatures of the elf village.
Yes. Beautiful miniatures done by Robbie Scott and his team. Yeah. So we had a whole. See, that's one of the things I did enjoy. We did this whole song and dance number in a little elf village. So the elf village is all miniature like that, and the elves are all blue screen, and it's just a ridiculous, stupid, but really I love doing it. Elf song and dance sequence. What more could you want?
I mean, it clearly has its fans, and I mean, for some people, like David Bowie, Jim Henson's Labyrinth is their their Star Wars, and then other people, Ella Enchanted might be their Star Wars. So it's different generations see that first film. It's that first film that always hits you.
Yeah.
That one that was Star Wars for me. You also worked on. There's a couple of other credits I want to cover.
Yeah.
I mean, you've actually worked for a friend of mine because I'm friends with Dexter Fletcher, who directed Rocket Man.
Well, who was obviously in Band of Brothers as well.
He was. Lovely guy.
Yeah.
Very different person now to who he was when he was in Band of Brothers.
Yes.
much more chilled, with his big wiry hair.
Yes.
And then also an actor friend of mine was who started the Outcast Creative with me. Dickon was also in Rocket Man. He played the owner of the pub, where Elton was performing as a kid. He looks like Elvis, if you remember. The character. Yeah. I mean, you were a visual effects consultant on Rocket Man.
Yeah, that's because basically I've done a run of films with Matthew Vaughn.
Yeah.
And which started out with, I came on board towards the end of Eddie the Eagle.
Yeah.
And then that led on to doing Kingsman 2. Right. And then because I'd just done Kingsman 2, the way Matthew works it is, he basically said, right, I'm doing Rocket Man, but it's I haven't got the money for you, Angus, he said, is the way he always puts it, which means basically I want to try and do visual effects, as cost effectively as possible. And and so but what I did, I consulted during pre-production on how we would shoot everything, and then I was around for the shoot, and then we they basically, I didn't stay on for post. We handed it over to CineSite in post production, basically, and then I would go back in and have a look at some shots, basically. But that's because then by that stage, I think I was moving on to possibly, I'm not sure. I can't remember the order of things now. The Rocket Man, the Kingsman, maybe. I think it might have been the Kingsman.
You did Kingsman 2 around the same time. I mean, the credit list is not small. So
so I think I was just moving on to the Kingsman at that stage.
So basically, the difference between a visual effects supervisor, who's somebody there supervising the effects both on set and in post.
I mean, I think
you're going in and doing a consultation and advising them how things should be done, and then you're off. Is that essentially correct?
Sort of. I mean, basically, we did I would work on how we're going to do things. I'd work with the art department. We'd plan what we need to build. We budget for those effects. We put a budget into the production. You negotiate on your budget and what needs to be done, and talk to the DOP, and you plan it all out basically, and then go, okay, there's the plan. Go ahead and shoot that. And I did oversee the majority of the shoot as well. On set basically. As a supervisor, one of the very fortunate things I get is I can be involved from the start of pre-production to the very final delivery. So I see the whole path, which is incredibly fortunate because it allows me to be employed usually for about 12 to 18 months, depending on, because you usually have about 3-4 months pre-production, 3-4 months shoot, 6 months post. It's something like that, basically. So if I'm very fortunate, I get to see it all the way through. Sometimes though, they just don't want to. They have me on board all the way through.
Another big film that you worked on was Narnia: The Voyage of the Dawn Treader.
Yeah.
I have to say, and this is going to sound terrible, when I went to see The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, which is the first book I ever read, I'm a massive fan of that 70s animation version.
Right.
Which had the voice of Arthur Lowe as the beaver from Dad's Army.
Right, yeah.
Remember it? And it
had
really
the BBC series.
It was no, not the BBC series. I'm talking about the crude animation that came out in 1974.
I don't
really
know.
crude.
Right.
Very crude. Well, they changed their accents halfway through.
What happened was the Americans re-accented the kids for the American release of that. So you've got the 4 British kids talking with these horrendous American accents, and then they changed some of the voice actors for some of the creatures, which was a real shame. Right. And then there's the British version, which is really hard to find now, which has all British cast.
I don't know.
Really,
I must admit,
quite famous people, and the music, the score for it is, oh god, the music's incredible. So I had that vision in my head, and when I went to see the first film, I was very disappointed in it. It didn't have the moments I was kind of waiting to see for whatever reason. And then they also included a load of scenes that weren't even in the book, which seemed like a strange use of a running time.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, so I never went to see The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, but I was told that this was a great adaptation of the books, quite faithful. And what's when you came on board this, because you're a visual effects supervisor on this, did you break down all the shots that they wanted and then said, okay, this is the budget that we need to do this, or is it the other way around, that they tell you the budget that you have for visual effects and then you say, okay, well, this is what we can do? How does that?
It's interesting because what happens actually, the producers, the production team of Walden Media, who were behind a lot of these, the trilogy, this particular trilogy, they're actually quite savvy, and they have a good idea of the scale and the scope and the budget of things. So I came on board, I was brought on board, and and Barry, who's the visual effects producer, and I did a breakdown based on storyboards. We did some storyboards, we did some previs. There was some previs already existing from some legacy previs from other before the film had started, which was excellent. And we would do a budget and we'd hand it in, and I think this one of these things where I think we kind of that's pretty much what we thought it was going to be, to be honest. Because it was an extremely well thought out film. The first film and the second film were huge budgets, and back in the day, and I think they were breaking new ground in some of the visual effects, to be honest, and so consequently some of those budgets went over. By the time they got to the third one, they were quite experienced and quite savvy, and they came, and the issue with this film was it's all going to take place largely take place on a ship at sea,
on a boat.
How are we going to do that without going to sea? So because we never went to sea, basically. So and so but by that stage they'd learned from the previous two films and had a really good idea of how they were going to do it. So we found it very easy in that respect, because they predicted a budget, we fitted into that budget, and we finished on that budget, to be honest.
Was that all shot in a big water tank surrounded by green screen?
It was shot on the Gold Coast in Australia. And the Australian crew there were fantastic. Some good stages in Gold Coast, but the ship was built on a motion base on a promontory at a place called Cleveland Point, so it could be moved around outside in day, and we could basically shoot out to a real sky and to sea.
Right, nice. Yeah.
So the idea was, we could try and get some shots on the deck of the ship for real, with you'd have a sea horizon beyond and a real sky beyond. Half the sail was built, so the ship stopped about halfway through the middle of the sail, and anything beyond that we would have to extend, basically.
Right.
And it was it just worked out. It was beautifully engineered by the art department and special effects team, and it kind of went extraordinarily well to plan. Also helped by Michael Apted was the director, who's one of those, unfortunately he's passed away now. He's one of those great unsung British directors, really, who knew exactly what he was doing. Gave us tremendous license in visual effects, because he said, look, I'm just doing the story, you do the visuals, and gave us tremendous license, to be honest.
That's probably exactly what I would say to you on set if we'd worked together. I'm directing the actors, you take care of that big sunset visual thing that I want on that screen over there for me.
Because let's face it, these visuals don't mean much without a good story, to be honest.
So just talk me through this shot here.
Yeah.
If there was no real boat, Was this a shot of a real location with a CG boat added?
Yes. So that's a CG boat. With a crew went out on a helicopter to shoot. So we were based in the Gold Coast of Australia. We had a second unit crew that went out and did helicopter plates around the South Island of New Zealand, basically. So they went literally across the strait to New Zealand, and so photographed coastlines around there. But even then, we got the sky and the water, but we've still reprojected and changed a lot of the landscape. So that's a CG landscape with real water and sky, basically.
Right. Yeah, and I'm guessing some extra islands in the distance there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, the range and the depth of the work you've done is it's quite phenomenal, really. Are there any? Do you feel like there's any boxes that haven't been ticked for you in terms of genre or type of film that you've wanted to do that's been on the list?
I feel like I must admit I'm jealous of Hail Mary in that, because when we were doing Lost in Space, it's like, oh, this is a dream come true. Got to do sequences with the Jupiter 2 that were sort of like the Millennium Falcon flying through the asteroid field. We did. So we were doing, but retrospectively, I think I wish I could have done it better. So I'd like to have another go, to be honest. So yeah, because I'm a sci-fi geek as well, and I'd love to just do it better.
You should have asked them for a job on the TV series.
Well, they did a very good job on that, I have to say.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty good.
And one of the companies that worked on that, of course, has just folded, which is Pixamondo. Yeah, which is a great shame. That's a big company that.
You also worked on a film which I think is actually quite underrated, and we've got a nice behind-the-scenes photo which I'll show in a sec, called Inkheart.
Yeah,
there's not a lot of great fantasy movies.
No, again, a fantasy trilogy of books, I think, by Cornelia Funke, and German fantasy, which therefore has that sort of, it's half fantasy. It's very grounded, and directed by Ian Softley. And of course, they had high hopes for it. We were very much in the shadow. This was a New Line movie, and we were very much in the shadow of. They were doing the feature
Lord of the
version
Rings.
Golden Compass.
Golden Compass, yeah.
Oh God, that film was terrible.
Yeah, well, I think
not a good movie.
I love the TV series. The TV series is fabulous.
TV series was good. The movie was all over the place.
Yeah, we had some good actors in Inkheart, and it was great to work on. Just kind of came and went, just didn't appeal. Yeah,
it was. I remember. It was good. Sorry, Inside Man, go ahead.
I was going to say, I remember at the time speaking to somebody who was working on Inkheart, because my brother was working on Golden Compass at the time.
Yeah.
And they said, well, we have a movie that's a fraction of the budget of Golden Compass, and you wait and see which one is the better.
Well, I mean, I would say it's honestly, it doesn't completely work. We had a cool CG smoke demon at the end of the movie, but yeah, we were again. I think that was probably about 40 to 50 million. Whereas Golden Compass was shooting at Shepperton and was probably
in the hundreds, wasn't it?
Yes,
a good few hundred million. But
Shepperton's studio was full, so you were bumped to Bray Studios down the road, which is what often happens. And this photo, to explain for people watching, so this is a miniature of a castle built on a scaffold frame to get a certain level off the ground. And you can see that this is the visual effects crew, which you would have been in charge of course.
I'm in there somewhere.
It's quite nice as well. Another synergy for you is, of course, Bray Studios is where Thunderbirds was shot.
Well, no, kind of Thunderbirds was shot in Slough, I think.
On the Slough trading. Bray, I thought they did a bit of Bray, or am I got that wrong?
Well, I think because I'm sorry, I'm going to geek out here, but basically, Jerry Anderson there's still a building in the Slough trading estate on the Ipswich Road, which is now, I think, some like a tire replacement garage or something like that. That is where they shot Fireball XL5 and Stingray. Then they needed to expand, and they moved down the road in the Slough trading estate to Stirling Road, where they got famously these 3 big buildings, which unfortunately have been torn down now. And that's where they did Thunderbirds and Captain Scarlet and Joe 19.
Right.
When they moved out of this place in Ipswich Road, Les Bowie moved in there and set up his company called Bowie Films. And so a lot of like the Ray Harryhausen, Mysterious Island, First Men in the Moon, things like that was shot in this building. Still there. I have paid homage to it.
Oh, I love Mysterious Island. What a great movie.
Yeah. And of course, Les Bowie is synonymous with Hammer and Bray Studios, which is where they were based until about sort of 67, 68. And then Lee was there. Lee Tuck was there as well.
Yeah, with Matt's Miniatures. Yeah. It's funny because the last time I spoke to Lee when he was over at Matt's Miniatures at Bray, he was saying he was telling me that where his chair is, there's a cross on the floor, and that's where the alien egg sequence with Ridley Scott, with his hands were inside the egg.
Yeah,
and he said I've got a cross on the floor where that egg was when Ridley Scott did that.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, well, I loved Bray because of all its associations and all its history.
Yeah.
But because we're shooting in the field just outside the stage, then Lee's built that miniature. Lee's company, Matson Miniatures, has built that miniature, and I shot the Roslin Chapel for Da Vinci Code, that castle for Inkart. We've shot explosions in that field. We shot explosions for Animal Farm in the neighbouring field. There's the Roslin Chapel there. So it's
that was a huge miniature. I can't believe that was a miniature when I saw that.
That's almost in the same place as you just saw.
I was totally sold that was a real location. See, what a great job.
Yeah, well, that was because at the time Roslin was entirely clad in scaffolding, so we couldn't shoot it, unfortunately.
No. And this one as well.
That's for Dark Shadows. Yeah.
Massive miniature.
Yeah, that's a bigature. Yes.
Is the desire for this kind of scale of size of miniature? I mean, obviously there are 2 things. One is you can get the detail looking very realistic, so it feels like a real building. But it's also to do with the way that they always said you've got to know how to light miniatures. You've got to know how to light model work. It's a different skill set to filming a scene with 2 actors in a room. It's
interesting because obviously we're actually mimicking main unit photography by Bruno Del Bonel, who was the main unit DOP. Peter Talbot, who's ex-Magic Camera Company, was the DOP on this. But the reason for the size on that, because we could have gone a quarter of that size if it weren't for the fact that we were going to set light to it and flames.
Right.
Yeah.
We destroyed it. We burnt it down basically. So flames. Even then, I look at it and I still wish we'd done some things slightly differently because the flames just about hold scale, I would say. And I think that's 5th scale that you're seeing there.
Yeah. It's actually an incredible piece of work. What's the time scale of building something like that from start to finish? Just give me an idea.
I think it was Lee and the Matson Miniatures team, and I think we were quite late. We spent a long time working with Rick Heinrichs, the production designer. It's kind of interesting because obviously Tim Burton movie, and I said to Tim very early on, I said, all your movies have iconic buildings in them. There's always one shot, the windmill in, or something like that. And I said, so it's going to be really important that this castle is distinctive. And I thought our design was kind of deliberately low key. Anyway, so it took a long time to fix that design, and finally Rick kind of released the design. So I think Lee had to build it in something like 12 weeks, I would say.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, but it was a big build. It's a huge
scaffold
build. It's almost like building a set. It's like really that when you're doing it on that scale, you're building a set, you're building scaffolding, you're cladding it in wood, you're putting, plaster sheeting on top of that. You're just doing all the construction techniques of a real size set almost. To be honest.
We're going to have to talk about this film. My apologies. Angus, what happened?
Well, that again. So what happened on that one is that Double Negative got that show because and Peter Chang, who's one of another Magic Camera Company alumni, who is, I cannot say enough about Peter Chang. He's awesome. He's one of the great talents. Look at his CV. He has done enormous films, Star Trek films, Fast and Furious films, huge films. Nothing phases him. And DNEG got this show, and it was just running behind schedule. And DNEG were just one of those things where, so it happens sometimes. What happens is you get sort of rolling shows, and one show impacts the next show. One show being late delivering impacts the next show, and so they were struggling to deliver. And so I was contacted by the studio and asked if I could take a chunk of the work and just get it done somewhere else, basically.
Right. Okay.
So I came on as an additional supervisor and took about 250 shots. I only worked on it for about 10 weeks, and took about 250 shots. Because Pete and I know each other really well. I just, we met up as soon as I was asked to join, and I just said, here's the deal. And he said, no problem. We've got to just get the show done. So I took some work off to Moving Picture Company and to Buff in Paris and things like that, and just tried to take a chunk of the shots off the list of things to do, basically.
I mean, I've heard various reasons as to why this film got into a bit of a pickle.
Yeah.
Because I know all these inside men, as you know.
Yeah.
And one of the things I heard was there was too many cooks pulling in too many different directions, and I don't know if that's.
Yeah. I don't know, because I came on quite late.
You probably weren't party to all that.
No, I wasn't.
It was more in prep and early on.
All I do remember is Pete and I in a projection in a suite at DNEG we start to do reviews with the director at 10 o'clock at night, and they'd go on till the early hours of the morning because
oh my god, yeah.
And to this day I'm because the way it would work is Pete would get to present all his work, which was thousands of shots, and I would get to present my shots, 250 shots. So I'd be sitting next to Pete, and Pete, of course, would have to show loads of material, and I think I dipped. And to this day, I'm just petrified that the director saw me on a Zoom call, and the head was just sort of, dipping.
Right.
And that's where I have to develop this sort of, well, Pete's amazing anyway, but he just has this amazing ability to just stick to it and keep working at it. And he did under a lot of stress on that show.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, I saw it at the cinema.
I mean, that
wasn't a bad film. It just was not very memorable, and the Arnie movie was just so much more fun.
This is the thing. I mean, that car chase sequence in the Colin Farrell Total Recall is, I think, freaking stonking. But does it have anything near as memorable as the Paul Verhoeven, arch, ridiculous, fun Total Recall? No, it doesn't. That's the thing. It's technically quite amazing, but it doesn't have three-breasted women.
No, and it doesn't have a bitch fight with Sharon Stone. Yeah,
exactly. So
you're really competing against the odds there.
Yeah, no, but this is the thing. You can do the greatest effect, and if it doesn't, charm the audience or have something striking or interesting about it, doesn't mean anything, does it?
Well, we've reached that time where you promised me that you would tell me your thoughts on the final season of Game of Thrones, the original series, because we're going to segue into
the original series,
House of Dragon. Yeah, the final the show that came before this one, obviously, that you worked on.
I worked on House of the Dragon season 1. Yeah.
Which my good friend Wil Johnson was in.
Right. Yes. Right.
And funny story, I was watching that episode, and he stands up and he starts doing that really powerful speech. And I immediately started leaving him a voice note saying, "Oh my God, this speech was amazing. They're prepping you for a really big role in season 2. I can tell. Congratulations." And then seconds later, his head got chopped off. And I'd already sent the message. And then I was like, "Yeah, sorry about that, Wil. It was a great scene. What a great scene for your reel." You know, very embarrassing. But so you did it on season 1. But you've worked on a lot of shows, and obviously, you know, we don't always watch all the things that we work on. But I wanted to know if you did watch the original Game of Thrones show, which is a big commitment for anyone.
I'm going to own up and say that when I interviewed for the job of House of the Dragon, I hadn't seen all of Game of Thrones.
Right.
And so
did you then watch it all?
So what I did prior to the interview, basically, I
crammed.
Yeah. I Wikipedia, Game of Thronesopedia, and YouTube crammed, basically.
Right.
To sound like I knew what I was talking about.
Okay.
Which fortunately I didn't get questioned, you know, on too many details. I think that's one of the things they wanted as well. I think they wanted someone different. Just, you know, sometimes that happens. Filmmakers just say, let's change everyone, you know, let's just start afresh.
Well, I mean, the reason I asked is because the final season of Game of Thrones is considered by the huge majority of the fans to be this big travesty.
Yes.
And I have to say, just as a filmmaker and someone who writes narratives and has written a lot of scripts, I was watching things like the Battle of Winter's Night, or whatever that episode is called, this attack on this castle, and I was just like, who wrote this? None of the military tactics that they're doing make any sense whatsoever. Who wrote this? Why is this like this? This is nonsense. And it just was. There were things like that, and it just felt like everybody was rushing to finish that show so that the two showrunners could go and work on Star Wars, which they never actually then even did. And they had the best show on television, and they kind of ruined it. But if you didn't commit to watching the whole thing, I can't really ask you your opinion on that.
Well, did you think though, because they weren't they trying to turn the story? I mean, obviously, I think George R.R. Martin wasn't happy, I believe, but they were trying to play with expectations, weren't they, with the final series, as far as I understood it, when I ultimately watched it. And did you not appreciate that idea that they were just?
I mean, I didn't mind some of the things that a lot of people complained about, certain people dying, certain people not getting together. That those character narratives didn't annoy me so much as just some of the things that were just out of whack with the world. And that big battle was one of them. And at one point, they had several major characters all completely covered in zombies. They all would have died. But miraculously, most of them survived. And it was stuff like that. It was like an episode of the A-Team, you know, where they get shot with 100 bullets, but they don't. There's no consequence. And I thought, what is this nonsense?
I think one of the strengths of House of the Dragon is that the way George Martin wrote it, almost like a history book. So it's actually some of the storylines in the series are just single lines, you know, and then it's almost like. And then such and such a person begat another person, you know, and so consequently, there's scope for the writers to develop all the bits in between, really. Whereas I think with Game of Thrones, you know, they were following closely books basically and well-loved stories.
Yeah.
I think House of the Dragon is literally like it's very thin. It's sort of almost like a history book.
Was there a sense coming into that show, because when it was announced, there was no excitement over it really, because people got so annoyed about the last show, and you know the internet and YouTube and stuff wasn't particularly in a buzz. I'm always of the view you've got to judge things when you watch them, and you know, don't prejudge stuff. I even gave Star Wars: The Acolyte a fair shake, and I did a weekly review of it, and I said I'm going to do an honest review. Unfortunately, it was pants. I did want it to be good. It wasn't good. But House of Dragon, as soon as I saw the first episode, I was like, this is written by people who know what they're doing. And it was like a Shakespearean stage play, and it was great.
If anything,
politics and you know.
Yeah, I mean, if anything, that would be my. I mean, there's a lot of talking in it, I would say.
Yeah, but good talking with good actors, with good lines. You know, that's okay if there's a lot of talking as long as it's done well.
Yeah, exactly.
Was there a sense of that pressure of like we've got this show's got to turn things around?
No, there was. I think
season one of it had completely tanked. That would have been the end of this franchise, I think.
Yeah, there was pressure. I think there was quite a lot of pressure actually, and there was also, like Band of Brothers, there was some considerable reshooting to reshape some of the episodes.
Right.
But our two showrunners were Miguel and Ryan, were amazing throughout. Ryan is the gentleman who really has got Ryan Condal has got has got the trust of George R. Martin. Absolutely loves it and knows the story and shepherds that through. Miguel on season one, because he only did season one, was very much the sort of the visual director, really.
Right.
But they were great, and there was a lot of pressure on them. In fact, I thought there was a visual effects pressure as well, because they'd done some great work. You know, Game of Thrones started out quite small, and then progressively, you know, by the time they were getting to see the last season, Joe Bauer and Steve Kullback and the team were doing some amazing work. And
there's some fantastic shots on seasons 5 and 6, especially.
Award-winning work, you know, and that was one of my a big attraction for me. Is I just wanted to do dragons. I wanted to do, because I'd done, we did cute dragons in Narnia, but I thought, well, this is great. We're going to get to design and animate 10 different dragons during the course of this series. What more could you want, basically? But there was we wanted it to be done really well to regain the confidence of the audiences, and I would say again, I think not all the visual effects, from a visual effects point of view, not everything's perfect, but generally it's pretty good with some, under the excellent guidance of our showrunners. Definitely.
I really enjoyed it. People have been quite divided over season 2. I'm not someone who's divided over it. I enjoyed season 2, and I'm keen to see season 3, and they're wrapping it up with season 3, and I think that's probably sensible. But I'm looking forward to it. It's really got a fantastic cast.
It's going to be big. Season 3 is going to be huge. Yeah.
So why did your role not continue on to season 2 and 3?
I was asked to continue. I mean, I did when I started the job. I thought, blimey, this could be 5 or 6, 7 years of work, basically. Which is, I've never had that. I tend to roll from one. I never quite know what I'm going to be doing next. So this is going to be a rare instance where I might actually have some idea of what I'm going to be doing for the next few years. By the time we got to the end of the series, Miguel was leaving, and I'd kind of, it's a little bit like you're gone through some personal things with, losing family and friends, etc. And one of the key ones actually was my best mate who I went to college with, who, and one of those rare instances I kept in contact with ever since. And we'd sometimes only meet maybe once, twice a year. We always used to, go for a pizza and just dream about writing and making our own scripts.
Right.
And so when he passed away just before the end of season 1, I thought, I keep talking about writing scripts. So I thought, I'm going to write a script in honor of my friend. So I decided to take the time off to do it, which is unusual because I'm always, paranoid about where the next job's going to come from. Paranoia, freelance paranoia. But I just thought, no, I'm going to do it. I'm going to write this script. I've spoken to him many times about it. We've got drunk and eaten pizza, talking about ideas, and I thought I'm going to make it. So I decided to just do that instead, basically.
Well, can you tell us anything about that project? Yeah, it's actually also a question from one of our people that's watching.
It's because I one of the early ambitions was I wanted to be a pilot. I always love anything to do with flying, and so it's about Operation Black Buck, which is the very first bombing raid during the Falklands War.
Is that the Vulcan?
Yeah.
To bomb the runway, isn't it?
Yeah, I've bought the rights to the excellent book Vulcan 607. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. And we need to talk about that.
And I've written a script for it, basically. Yeah.
Fantastic. I'd be very, very up for watching that. Oh, Gary Bolter from Australia is watching. He's just messaged me on Facebook to say what a great interview this is. You can actually write that in the chat as well, Gary, so that so that Angus can see it. Feel free. I mean, House of Dragon, good experience, because I know it was all worked around COVID, and because what Wil said when he came on, he said there was a lot of extra time because of that. So they got to rehearse all their scenes properly, which is unheard of these days. They had lots of rehearsals, and he really liked that.
Well, also not only that, because by the time I joined, because I just finished doing The King's Man, and we came out of COVID, and the COVID delay basically had allowed Ryan Condal and the writing team to hone their scripts. So this is a rare thing. We had 10 95% finished scripts to go into the shoot with, which meant you could plan everything properly.
Nice.
Because often what happens with these series is they start with 2 or 3 scripts, and then the other scripts start to trickle in, and then they start to get later and later and later, and everyone's rushing around more and more. So we were really fortunate in that we had 10 complete scripts to do a breakdown on straight away out of COVID. And then, yes, absolutely. HBO totally embraced all the restrictions. We had a huge COVID team, as productions did around that time. Every day we would get our nostrils thoroughly rooted around in. You'd have the nice nurses, and then you'd have the hard, devil nurses, basically. The ones that just tickled the edge of your nostril, and the ones that shoved it up into your brain, basically.
Yeah. And then when you went back to get the next test, you'd be like, "Oh, I'm going to go and see that one, not that one."
Yeah. And then obviously, we're all wearing masks, and we had teams enforcing distancing as well. But it all worked out amazingly well. I got my first batch of COVID just as we were finishing post-production, basically. So, having spent 6-7 months with hundreds of people on stages, basically.
Yeah. Well, not bad going at all. To wrap up, there's a few questions in the chat, nearly all of them from David Macy, who's a scriptwriter, funnily enough, who's been watching. But is it all right if we just do those quickly?
Yeah, sure.
And then I think we can let you go. I'd love you to come back on though, because we've only covered not even a fraction of your stuff. Also, if that film becomes a reality, of the Vulcan, you must come back and chat.
Well, it's interesting because here's another thing where this is a whole other conversation, and I'll just do it really quickly because I've written the script. I'm kind of happy with the script. But again, I'm trying. There's an interesting point is that the majority of the people involved are still alive. So I have to honor their stories, which means I can't necessarily rearrange things for dramatic purposes or over accentuate things for dramatic purposes. And so that's what I'm finding is interesting is that I love the story. I think it's full of detail, fascinating detail, all sorts of great character stories. But if you if you wanted to Hollywoodize it, you'd merge things, and so I saw a very, very interesting story with a showrunner, I think who basically said only do stories about people who've died.
Right.
Because then you can play fast and loose with their memories.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, listen, I've done a lot of stage plays about very hot topics. The last one being I did the stage play about the post office scandal.
Yes.
Which, as you know, is still going on.
Yeah.
And in fact, the postmaster who just died the other day without seeing all of his compensation, Parmu Kalia, was a friend of mine. He came to see the show. And I decided quite early on when I was writing the script that my original premise for it wouldn't work because the play would just be too miserable and people would hate it.
Yeah.
And so I decided to turn it into a black comedy at the expense of the guilty parties. So we had all this. The opening night, as I saw sitting on the front row, there was a whole load of former sub postmasters with their arms crossed like this, looking very sort of formidable. And I recognised some of them off the TV, and I was like, "Oh shit!" But we, as soon as we started taking the piss out of the bad guys in the play, I knew we had them, and and then they coming up to us in the bar. This is amazing. You're the first people to tell our story, and we had 40 of them come on the last night. So word got round pretty quick. So you're right in the sense you've got to be really careful how you articulate these things, but it's also kind of an honor as well. You're you're honoring the story. And it is quite an incredible story. I've read the book, and it's funny because I had a conversation not that long ago with somebody saying, "Why hasn't this been made into a film yet?" So it's really interesting that you've bought the rights. I'd love to read the script if you're still looking for feedback.
Yeah, definitely, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
But so we'll talk about that. What else do you have coming up? I mean, you've just worked on the last Beetlejuice movie, of course.
Yeah,
which would have been a pretty big job.
Yeah.
I know you're working on a a very big thing right now that you've told me about, but I can't say anything about it.
I think I can say what it is.
Spandex involved, but that's about all.
Well, basically, it's part of the new DC universe being imagined by James Gunn for Warner Brothers.
Right.
So Superman last year was the first of the new DC universe under James Gunn. James Gunn being the gent who did obviously the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, and he's been brought in along with Peter Safran to basically reinvent the DC comic universe.
Peter Safran, the act? No, that's Peter. I'm thinking of a different Peter.
Yeah,
and Peter Safran worked on before.
Well, a lot of. I think he's a big producer who's worked on a lot of.
He's a hands-on guy, isn't he? He's a hands-on producer.
Yeah, we haven't seen him. I think he's been. We're slightly under the radar. I call us, because basically, obviously, Superman was massive. They've just done Supergirl, which is the next one in this universe, also massive. We are unusual in that we're an outlier movie. It's called Clayface. Clayface is one of the lesser-known Batman villains from the comics and the cartoons, and we're quite a small. We're quite a relatively small film by comparison with Superman and Supergirl.
Right.
And it's an origin movie, so it's in the sense that it's like Batman Begins or like the Joker, maybe, in that it's how this character becomes the villain that he is, basically.
Okay. Well, you probably shouldn't tell us any more because I'm sure you're under NDA. I don't want to get you.
No, I think you can find that on the internet somewhere.
I'll just There's a couple of questions here, so that I haven't said. So I just want to. This is a good one, I think. Are there enough people coming into your industry as apprentices for traditional VFX to continue at your standard?
Well, the truth is, there is lots of talent around still, and so I have a department that I'm working with at the moment, and there are lots of smart young people still coming into the industry. The obvious routes these days are through data wrangling, which is when people on set, you often employ young people to just take in lots of notes about cameras, details of how we shot things, etc. But that can get quite complicated, and often I think, by the way, that visual effects is a great academy for film, because you have to know a bit about everything. You get involved in costumes and green screens and sets and plans, and so you do cover a lot of the departments or get involved with them. But there are amazing young people who are super smart at all this. They just get it straight away. If you're thinking about the more traditional roles, perhaps model making, because you'd think maybe model making is not happening as much these days, obviously, with CG and the advent of AI. But the truth is,
we'll talk about in a sec.
The truth is, it's still happening. Model making is still going on. The film I was speaking about earlier that's shooting in 3 Mills Island, that is all conventional stop motion with stop motion sets. It will shoot for a year there with multiple camera setups, with stop motion animators. I've seen some of the sets, immaculately made sets, etc. So that's still going on. And what's going to be difficult is, I think it's going to continue. There's still going to be Wes Anderson movies where he wants to build sets practically. There's still going to be Tim Burton movies. AI is going to. Unfortunately, films ideally they make money. So producers are always going to seek a way to cut their costs. And just like other revolutions we've seen in other industries, AI will provide ways to do that. It's going to seep in from the bottom. But I see it a bit like, vinyl and things like that. It's not, traditional filmmaking is not going to go away. We might find that budgets aren't going to hit the peaks that they used to, because no one's going to. And what's interesting about Hail Mary is for Amazon, is it cost $200 million. And it's a practical production. There's lots of CG, lots of visual effects in there, obviously, but there's an awful lot. It's shot for a good 26 to 30 weeks.
I wonder if 80 million of that was Ryan's salary.
Well, but the point is that Amazon's willing to invest in it. I would imagine the next Bond movie, directed by Denis Villeneuve, its selling point will be they did it all for real. There's the last thing you would want in a Bond movie is to say there's any AI in it.
Right.
So there's going to be different levels. I fully expect that there will be an AI film will come out within the next year or so. I
just saw an AI Star Wars fan film about some of the rebels that are left behind on Hoth. And I mean, I got watching it was, it's not perfect, but
no,
looking at that to where it was a year ago, the jump is massive. Yeah. And it's got a good script and it's a good idea. It's a good
That's
little
the key
concept.
thing, isn't it? Really, that's the key thing.
Yeah, and I actually really enjoyed it. And the thing that was better than any of the episodes of The Acolyte, which is not a high bar, but someone had put a lot of thought into it. My take on AI is it will be an interesting tool when used right, with creativity and a lot of thought behind it. It'll be an absolutely diabolical tool when used just because someone is lazy. I won't ask Inside Man to chip in on this, because that would be another hour of conversation, but because I know his thoughts on it already. But it is a divisive thing. But I'm producing a music album at the moment, and I'm singing the lyrics into this mic, and then I'm using AI to create my voice into this wonderful female singer on the album who sounds nothing like me, but is getting the tone of the words and the pitch, and I'm singing it emotionally how I want it, and then it's being transformed into this wonderful thing. and I've always wanted to do some songs. So I'm producing this album at the minute, and I can do it all on my own. All the instruments are on my computer. So in that context, as a tool for me, it's amazing. And I'm sure people in the music industry will argue that I'm not creating real art. I would disagree. I'm just using the tools that are available to me. I'm sure I get the same art budget. You know, and going.
I'm experimenting with it as well, and using various different AI software. We can't, however, use any imagery from our film. I can't post it anywhere on the internet, obviously.
Right.
So I can only use AI to do anything, to experiment with things at the moment. And even more so than previous films, Warner Brothers clearances, I have to sign documents showing the provenance of every image that we create.
Right.
To say that I have not, created anything using an AI tool, basically.
Wow.
Now that's going to affect things for a while, but ultimately, it's going to be it's a great tool. So it's still going to boil down to good story. It's still going to boil down to the mind behind the film or the whatever media it is you're working on, as to whether it's any good or not, basically. Yes, unfortunately, I think it will take some jobs, but I do think also people at the moment, and it will slowly change, want real. They want.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I as a director, I would always shoot practical if I could afford it.
Yeah.
But I am also partly excited about the opportunities this might give me to still be able to create when people are not knocking on my door and offering me jobs,
Yeah.
So we shall see.
Yeah.
I'd be terribly remiss if I didn't talk about Alan with you for a little bit before we wrap this up.
Yeah.
And just to briefly summarize, as I said at the beginning, Alan and I met, I think it was 1988 or 1989. We met at the South London Warlords Games Convention, which was in Kensington Town Hall at the time. And our first conversation between us was me saying to him, "How on earth do you do that?" And he had dry ice on the War Games board.
Yeah.
They were doing this science fiction power armor game. Did you ever see the models that he built for that power armor game?
I saw quite a few of his models at his house in Peckham, but I don't
like men in jetpacks with sort of guns, and they had car radio aerials attached to these solid lumps that Alan had made, so they could raise the figures up and down and fight with each other. And he had that big sort of star-based thing on the table, and I sort of was drawn to the table by this white smoke pouring out of this water, and I could see him every so often would get this stuff out of this bag and chuck it in, and that's how he and I got talking. And I joined the club, and we collaborated on a few games together at Salute, including the Return of the Jedi space battle game that I did, which we built a 6-foot Super Star Destroyer for, which I've still got pictures of. Don't have the model anymore. I mean, to describe him in a few words is difficult, but what I would say, he was one of the most giving and generous people I've ever sort of worked with, both as a friend and also as a professional collaborator. He did a huge number of things for me for either peanuts or nothing when I didn't have a budget, and including on my last feature film, we did some sky replacements and this and that to make things match up for different times of day and whatnot. What was your experience of working with Alan?
We did talk a little bit earlier this afternoon, didn't we? And I was trying to remember when I first met Alan, because he was definitely working at CFX in his company in Darblay Street, which is one of
I went there several times. You went through that weird door and went into the little courtyard, and then up the stairs, and there was that corridor with all the different doors along.
I would say I learned an enormous amount from Alan. So we were both, clearly one of the things about a lot of the people that I know, I guess, is we're all just fans who wanted to get into the industry, and Alan was one of those, obviously. And he forged his path in a different way to, say, people like Steve and myself, Steve Beck and myself. But he did, but he was, to me, he was just super smart because he knew digital, basically, before any of us did. He was writing, he was learning how to use the most primitive computers to create digital imagery at CFX. So as far as we were concerned, he was flipping guru, So, and he was always super enthusiastic. We used to get together. I remember he also obviously loved model building. So I think Steve had just finished doing Space Precinct, and he had, or even, dare I say it, Dick Spanner. And
Dick Spanner, that was a great little show. That Channel 4, wasn't it? Channel 4. Yeah,
and Alan wanted to shoot some stuff, so he built a miniature spacecraft, and he had an old Newman Sinclair camera from CFX, and I built a camera track so we could motion control it, and we did these shots at Bray Studios in the Dick Spanner stage, which was one of those Nissan huts.
Yeah.
So yeah, he was just always.
Wasn't that shot? Was that model kind of looked almost a bit like a Vulcan bomber? Is that the one?
It did a bit, yeah. Sort of, yeah.
I saw that
slightly dipped wings, yeah.
Dipped wings. The wings dipped down at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah. I saw that footage. She showed me that.
Yeah, because that was the thing. He was just. We were all learning about the technology as it was changing. He was way ahead of us. We were keen to hang on to his shirt tails. And yeah, it was just, I used to, because we both lived in Peckham at that time.
Yeah.
We'd drive back from Shepperton to Peckham in my 2CV. And so we'd just have endless chats about things we wanted to do, etc. And it was just, yeah. I mean, he was.
Do you remember he called the corner outside his house "dog shit corner"? Some owner their dog was coming along dumping their business every day.
I remember, very long nights at Magic Camera Company doing stuff. When we were just learning how to do things, endless enthusiasm, and it was just awesome.
I think it's fair to say, isn't it, that really he was one of the pioneers of CGI. He was right there at the beginning.
Yeah.
And I don't think he gets the credit for that he deserves.
No,
really.
yeah, absolutely right. I mean, but obviously because we, if you remember vaguely at that time, a company called CFC, Computer Film Company, were doing the very first sort of digital composites, even before ILM were doing it. They were forging, and then there was. And so, it was that sort of time where people were just experimenting with doing these sorts of things. So, because we knew Alan, Steve, he was drafted in at Magic Camera Company, and he was the architect of everything that we did digitally there. Because we bowed to his experience and what we need. So he told us to get the Amiga computers. He told us to get the early Silicon graphics machines and put Matador on there and forged this department when no one else was doing it. Really, people were starting to do it, but he was, he was right at the leading edge of all that sort of stuff. He was just all. And the thing was, actually, he loved the old techniques. The other thing, he's also a Thunderbirds fan. He's also a UFO. 1999 fan. But but his route in was through digital, and that's what he excelled at. He was absolutely a leader in it. Yeah, one of the few names that people knew in the early digital days of anyone who did digital work, basically.
A real loss.
Absolutely.
I think it was in 2021 or 21.
Yeah, I know. So, yeah. Unfortunately, I've lost a little bit of contact with him because when he went to the Isle of Wight. But miss him terribly.
Yeah, same. I mean, me and my ex-wife we were still married at the time. We went over there for a week's holiday, and Linda and Alan sort of showed us around the island, and we went up some walks with them out to the spindles or whatever they're called, with the lighthouse, and it was a great time. And we shot some stills. They were both Linda, of course, Alan's wife is also an accomplished VFX artist as well. She's done all kinds of work because they were working on projects together. And a lovely lady, and they did a whole load of stills for us for my film The Journey, and then we needed shots of this lady in a white dress, or we brought a dress for my then partner to wear, and Alan and Linda took hundreds of photos of her kind of standing on the cliff edge looking out to sea, which was supposed to be Greece, but of course it doubled. All the early posters were actually taken on the Isle of Wight, which is quite funny. And of course I gave him credit for that in the titles, because I always insisted on crediting absolutely everyone. Sorely missed. But it's great to be able to talk about him with such positive memories, and somebody we both worked with. And on that subject, just mentioned Steve Begg, who has been mentioned a few times in the
legendary Steve Begg.
This is your warning, we're coming for you. You are coming on the show. I've met Steve several times, and again, his miniature work is absolutely incredible. When you see this photograph of him standing next to this car, and you know what scene this is from, you'd be thinking, "Oh my God, really? Was that a miniature at some point in that scene? At what point in that scene was that a miniature?" You know,
more than anything, though.
Go on, sorry.
More than anything, again, though, Steve's got that essence of that Derek had of being an artist. That's
He's the contemporary Derek Meddings, really, isn't he?
Well, he obviously followed in the great footsteps of Derek, and then Brian Johnson, and then he sort of came on. And he storyboards, he does concept art. He's a multi-hyphenate, basically.
Well, another great legend, and hopefully one that will be coming on the channel before the end of the year. And it's great to get more guests from behind the camera, because I've had a lot of actors. We're trying to get somebody in every crew position on the set on the channel at some point. I even want to interview a caterer, who, as you know, is the most important job on the film
of course,
set.
Absolutely.
If the food is crap, the crew will complain pretty quickly, and your production will be in trouble. Never go short on the money on catering. What would you say is as a visual effects supervisor, what would you say is the golden rule that you've learned over your career?
I genuinely keep learning, because I sometimes think that's a rule, and I think the golden rule, actually, I did a commercial. Basically, here's a little short story. Basically, Derek did Superman 1 and Superman 2, and in Superman 2, was it Superman 3? Richard Pryor is in
Richard Pryor, Superman 3.
Yeah. So there's a shot where Robert Vaughn, is basically has his lair on top of a skyscraper, and he has an artificial ski slope on it, and so they did this shot. They did this shot where they start with, I think, Richard Pryor sort of, crazily coming down the slope, and they pull back, and you revealed the whole thing was on top of a skyscraper. And that was done with a technique that Derek did, which is whereby he would go to find the skyscraper, send out, again, a gentleman called Alan White, take a picture on 10:8 negative, so it's a huge, high-quality negative, blow that up to 10 foot by 8 foot, so that he could then physically retouch the photo, if he wanted to. Put a big piece of glass in front of that photo, put 3M material on it, front projection material on it, cut it out to the right shape, and he'd shot a VistaVision plate of Richard Pryor on the slope. So he'd project the bit of Richard Pryor on the slope onto the front of this photo. And then, because with a front projection rig, he could zoom in and start tight on Richard Pryor and pull back. So it was a way to do a sophisticated matte shot in the old days, pre-digital, but with a camera move, basically, so you weren't locked off anymore. On the back of that film, we at Magic Camera Company got a commercial for the Bank of Boston, which wanted to do something very, very similar. Derek was away on a holiday, and me being super keen, I thought, I will do it. I know how to do this. I've seen how Derek does it, but we're going to do it with a new twist. We're going to make a big photo blow up, but I'm going to rear project the live action, and I'm going to use a motion control rig, the one that I was operating. Suffice to say, and I won't go into the details, but there's the shot. Yeah. Derek did. Yeah.
Found it.
Yeah. It didn't go very well, this commercial, primarily because I bowed to pressures from the director who wanted to move the camera in certain ways, etc. And Derek came back, and he, there was a big commercial at the time. This was it was when Dukakis was running for the presidency, and he was strongly allied to the Bank of Boston, who were financing him as the Democrat. And didn't go very well. All sorts of crap rained down on us because I'd got it all wrong, basically. Derek he basically stepped in and took all the blame, basically.
Wow.
Yep. And effectively told them to where they could go. Then he sat me down and just said, never listen to anybody, just always trust your eye.
Yeah.
Because what had happened on the day was we'd built this tower to get this down angle. I'd calculated it out. I'd worked it out on all bits of paper, worked out the angle. I remember climbing up the top of this ladder and looking at it and going, oh, bollocks, that doesn't look right at all. Why is the perspective not look right? And I got it wrong, basically. But now, because we've built this huge tower, I can't change anything. And we need to shoot because the light's going to be right at this time. So I said, okay, let's shoot it. And he just said, he never really chastised me. He just took the blame. He shouldered the blame. And he just told me to always trust my eye. So I think it sounds really simple, but it's pretty important advice.
I've got a final question from the chat here. Wormy Spoons, who's a great guy, he's always coming on and supporting my podcast.
Yeah.
Has Angus seen What Dreams May Come? That's the Robin Williams movie, or The Fountain, and what did he think about the visuals in them?
Oh, I worked with the director of What Dreams May Come for 2 days.
Wow.
He's a brilliant guy and a much misunderstood. You remember he's going to at one stage he was going to direct Alien 3 before David Fincher came on board. And
Inside Man knows all about this with the monks and the burning wood and all
exactly.
Of that.
It was that was one of the best scripts I've ever read. I thought it was amazing.
Yeah,
it was
me too.
I thought it was taking the Alien franchise in a whole different direction.
Absolutely agree. Yeah.
Yeah, this bizarre visuals of these monks inside a sort of a planet abbey, almost painting the sky. The idea, you have these really great fantasy visuals. And unfortunately, all that got lost, of course, as it was just too much for the studio, and then Fincher was brought on, and that's the whole of the story. So I got to work with the director of so I have a soft spot for What Dreams May Come. When it came out, I was really blown away by it, and and because I then got to briefly meet the director, I now understand. I see, I link the two together, and I really appreciate what he did on it. So that I'm more. I also got to meet Darren Aronofsky to interview for another film. And he's also a great guy, but for some reason, The Fountain doesn't grab me the same way as What Dreams May Come does. For some reason, I don't know why. It's nothing to do with Robin Williams versus. It's just I feel like What Dreams May Come is a little bit more heartfelt, whereas The Fountain feels to me. I know it's a beautiful story, but. It just didn't quite grab me. That's all I can say, really. I have to be honest.
Yeah, I found What Dreams May Come was really affecting, and I've been through a fair few number of bereavements in my life, unfortunately, and quite a high number of people that have been young, under the age of 40, that have gone. And I've got it in my DVD collection, and I've only been able to watch it once since I saw it at the cinema, because it's too close to the bone for me.
Well, and it may be, the interesting thing is that it may be, honestly, that when I saw The Fountain, I'm like you, I've lost quite a lot of very close friends and family, but maybe back then when I did see The Fountain, I just wasn't appreciative of it. You know what I mean? Now I get teary at the slightest thing, basically, as life's hit us with all sorts of different, challenges and losses and things like that. If I see something remotely great, I get teary, basically. If I think something, it could be a goal in a football match, it can be a moment in a film, it can be a piece of music. If I just think that is awesome or great, I get all sentimentally.
I'm going to send you a link to watch my last feature film, which Alan did the effect shots for.
Right.
Because it's about 3 people dealing with bereavement. That's what the movie, and it's all shot in Greece. Forget the London stuff in the first 5 minutes, which all looks terrible. I'll tell you the story of why that all went wrong another time. But I'll be very interested to hear what you think of the film.
Yeah.
You having said that, I think you'll probably find it quite impactful. Filmmaker Oliver Hollingdale, who is also in the chat. See, all these people are turning up late now. Where were you earlier? He's The Fountain is his number 3 movie.
Well, I completely understand. I just, it's just one of those things. Just didn't quite, gel with me at the time. Yeah.
What is your number 1? What would you? Tell me. That's a terrible question because people always ask me that, and I never know what to say. Tell me a film that would be in your top 10.
All right.
Or a couple of them.
Monsieur Hulot en Vacances. And definitely Playtime.
Playtime. Who directed that?
They're both Jacques Tati movies.
Oh, right.
Fantastic.
Okay.
Fantastic.
I've seen the first one, I believe.
I absolutely love Jacques Tati movies, basically.
Right.
But then, so basically, I can tell you very quickly, without in no particular order. Monsieur Hulot's Holiday, Monsieur Hulot en Vacances. Playtime, Blade Runner, Chitty Chitty Bang Bang.
Right. Well,
and if there was one movie before you got into the business, if you could choose one movie that you look back on and you think, wow, I wish I was around to have worked on that, what would that movie be?
Yeah. Blade Runner. I think.
Yeah, I can see that. I'm sure you would have done a.
It's one that, again, I saw it when I was at college, and I remember coming out into the London night, and it was raining, and the streets were wet, and the neon was reflecting everywhere, and it just, everything seemed to sort of gel. Yeah. And I'm a strong believer in the poetry of, how we know all these stories about great films where they've either been, the stories behind Blade Runner, recording the voiceover under duress at Cannes Film Festival, the editing, the things they've done. It's the disjointed nature of the film that is the poetry to me. Because my brain, and that's just what I think we miss these days, is my brain made up the bits in between. So sometimes the thing that captivated me more was the things that I didn't quite understand. And nowadays it's like the new maxim from Netflix, which is to repeat the storyline 3 times. I actually enjoy the bits, some of the mystery in film, if you mean.
Funny. It's funny. I was having a conversation with somebody not that long ago, a few days back, and we were discussing exactly that. The fact that we aren't that dumb that we need everything laid out for us. We don't need an explanation for absolutely everything. And what gaps are there, or ambiguous endings however ambiguous an ending might be.
Yeah,
I kind of prefer that than having something tied up with frilly bows, or the ambiguous ending left there for a sequel. I want to fill in that end. I want my own ending.
Yeah.
I want my gaps,
those are the things you think about further, aren't they, afterwards?
And that's what makes a movie stay with you.
Yeah. And I think one of the reasons why Blade Runner attracts me, not only was it obviously some of the classic sci-fi visuals, but it was some of the ideas in it still stick with me. I still think some of the lines in that film are some of the best ever. So
beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, it's. Yeah. Do you have a preference of which version you like the best?
Well, pretty much. I'm afraid to say I'm going to go out there. I like the original version I saw on that wet night in 1980.
With the voiceover.
With voiceover.
I like the voiceover because I think it's got that Mickey Spillane kind of film noir.
Yeah.
I had to go and meet her at that kind of thing. I like that about the movie. Yeah. And then when they cut it out, I was like, everybody says this is cool now they've removed it. I'm not sure you would have got the film completely if it was like that when it first came out.
I don't like the remastered versions. I don't even like Ridley Scott authored remastered versions. I don't like the about color.
6 versions of it now.
Digital remastering has lost the original cinematography, which because it tends to go contrastier, bluer, and it just the cinematography by Jordan Cronenworth, wasn't it? It just it's gorgeous on cinema on film, and the digital remastering doesn't do it.
You lose the film grain. As well.
Yeah.
They think I'm not sure how many zips I want to see on people's faces, really.
Yeah.
That you couldn't see before, with 4K and.
Yeah. I mean, there's one thing they're doing now, which is literally taking it directly from the neg rather than any real cleanup jobs, which I much prefer. Because we then have the original grain of the film. We have the original contrast, the original color levels and settings there.
Yeah.
Rather than some of the adjustments that tend to get made. For example, there was a recent 4K release of Alien, and of course now you can actually see into the shadows. I would rather not see into the shadows.
Agreed. Agree 100%. The shadows were what it was. That film was all about, really.
Exactly. Yeah.
You can't see where things are, and I agree. Well, look, we've gone way over time. This is almost as long as the David McGiffert interview, who was the first AD on Back to the Futures 1, 2, and 3.
Wow.
Rabbit.
I bet his stories.
I don't know if you ever crossed paths with him.
No, I haven't.
One of my favourite guests of all time. Just a lovely human being with a fantastic story about how he quit his career ahead of his time because he realised how much time he was missing with his daughters, and it was a beautiful moment. And we were all sort of almost in tears on that bit. But we were sort of at this kind of time frame, and I was like, David, we should probably end now. And he's, I've got another story about Christopher Lloyd. Let me tell you one more. I'd love you to come back because there's so much more we could have talked about. And do keep me posted about the film project. And now you've been on the channel, you're more than welcome to come back and use this to promote anything you're doing in it. That's kind of how it works. You've given us your time and come and spoken to us, and hopefully the channel will only get bigger. So if you ever want to come back and promote something, this door will always be open to you.
Well, thank you very much. It's been lovely to speak to you, and apologies for waffling on.
No, not at all. No waffling. Everybody in the chat has been very impressed. So there you go. That's my Danish cousin sending you her regards. People are interested in this stuff, believe it or not. And I wouldn't be surprised if you haven't got a good book in you. So you might want to think about that at some point, because you've worked on some fantastic projects. You've worked with directors at the top of their game, but I dare say some of the more interesting stories have probably come from the low budget projects with people that are maybe not so at the top of their game, and everything in between. It's been a real pleasure. I'm so glad you responded when I reached out.
Also, really glad to talk about Alan. Definitely.
I mean, any opportunity to talk about the late great Alan Marks is always welcome. What can I say? Just miss him so much, and it's a terrible shame we never got to do the Pegasus Bridge film, but that's a whole other story. If it ever does get made, it's going to have Alan's name right at the front of the credits. I can tell you that now. So but We are going to be back tomorrow night with the Nielsen ratings. Funnily enough, this is my weekly show where we review the new films and things that have come out. We're going to be predominantly talking about Project Hail Mary. I'm sure there'll be some.
That means you've got to watch it tomorrow.
I am going to watch it tomorrow. Yeah, right. I'm going to watch it tomorrow afternoon. There'll be some discussion on the late Chuck Norris, who I did a song for on my channel. You can see it. There's a Chuck Norris dedication song on my channel, which I wrote the lyrics for and whipped up rather quickly. And we had a little dedication stream to him last week because, let's face it, Invasion USA was a ton of fun. And I've got another industry interview on Friday with trance DJ Paul Webster, who's another person at the top of his game in an entirely different profession. So we'll be talking to Paul Webster on Friday. That interview was postponed from last week because he had COVID, funnily enough. People are still getting it. There we are. But thank you so much, and thank you for staying for the extra time.
Absolute pleasure.
Really, really appreciate it. Thanks to everybody in the chat, and thanks also for my co-host, the Inside Man, for coming on.
Nice to speak to you both.
And to you, Angus. Thank you very much for your time.
Cheers.
And we'll see you all again soon. Take care, everyone.
Cheers.
Misfits and dreamers getting innovative. It's film, TV, and theater in the mix. Industry interviews where ideas get their fix. He's creative, we're creative. How about you? Share your passion, join the crew. At Outcast Creative, we're breaking through. Hang with Lance and the Outcast crew. Hang with Lance and the Outcast crew. Interviews with fellow artists on the rise and reviews that might surprise. Films, TV shows from back in the day. You might just find a hidden gem today. He's creative, we're creative. How about you? Share your passion, join the crew. At Outcast Creative, we're breaking through. Hang with Lance and the Outcast crew. Hang with Lance and the Outcast crew. Makers, comic book creators, stand up proud. Actors, musicians, board game designers, be loud. At Outcast Creative, amazing's the word. He even interviewed the legend, Galen Hurd. He's creative, we're creative. How about you? Share your passion, join the crew. At Outcast Creative, we're breaking through. Hang with Lance and the Outcast crew. Hang with Lance and the Outcast crew. So come along, take a chance. Join the Outcast, hang with Lance. Bring your vision, your art, your flair. At Outcast Creative, there's always room to share. Hang with Lance and the Outcast crew.
Major Howard, D Company is being assigned to carry out one of the most important tasks on D-Day. I can't think of anyone who has a more vital objective. Your company will be capturing 2 bridges intact, less than 500 yards apart, in a coup de main assault in 6 gliders. You will land at night and hold them until relieved. The main threat to you is the 21st Panzer Division. They've taken a beating, but they're an elite unit, well armed, with self-propelled guns, tanks, and plenty of artillery. If they counterattack straight away, you can expect your casualties to be high. But no matter what happens, no matter what they throw at you, you must hold that bridge.